Chapter 1256. Li Tianlan glanced at Li Huazhang in surprise. Because he left early, he had no deep impression of this uncle, so he couldn't judge his position. But at this time, his attitude was very clear. Obviously, he chose to stand on his side. Li Tianlan looked at the crowd around Li Huazhang again. A dozen people were not a large-scale group in the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but Li Tianlan was very familiar with a few of them. Seeing Li Tianlan looking over, they nodded slightly and raised the corners of their mouths, revealing a smile. Advisor Li, when Senior Li died, young Master Huawu was not born, so Senior Li chose to let His Majesty East Emperor temporarily control the Li family. The chubby Zhua guest took a deep look at Li Huazhang. I still say the same thing. The Li family belongs to the Li family, so it should be inherited by the Li family. Now the Li family is divided into two, Emperor Dong's palace and the Purgatory of Heaven capital. This is definitely not the situation that Senior Li wants to see. If he is still here, he will certainly hope that young Master Huawu can slowly integrate the power of the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace and make the Li family strong again. I am a member of the Li family. Li Huazhang said coldly, but everyone knows that the Li family's power is mainly concentrated in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Emperor Dong's palace is the foundation of Tianlan, and its main body is Samsara Palace. What does it have to do with the Li family? Zhua guest, I can understand that you regard Huawu as the young master of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But the Li family belongs to Tianlan, and Emperor Dong's palace belongs to Tianlan. We don't argue about whether Huawu is qualified to inherit the Li family. At least, he is not qualified to inherit Emperor Dong's palace. What a joke. A sharp voice rang out from the back of the crowd. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly, and the corners of his mouth raised in an almost imperceptible curve. Here it came. The purpose of his coming here today was to see what kind of monsters were there in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The more such people came out, the better. An old man who looked nearly 60 years old walked out of the crowd and said coldly, "Is there no power of the Li family in Emperor Dong's palace?" The foundation of Emperor Dong's palace was built by the Li family. Later, the Samsara Palace joined because of His Majesty Dong Huang. The old man paused, looked straight into Li Tianlan's eyes, and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, if I may be so bold to ask, do you now think that you no longer belong to the Li family, but only to Dong Huang?" Li Tianlan looked at him quietly. The old man in front of him looked the same as the left-honored guest, but he was also completely different. When the latter stepped forward, his gaze was calm. On the other hand, the eyes of the old man in front of him flickered. It was obvious that he was plotting something. "Who are you?" Li Tianlan asked directly. "Codename Tengu." The old man smiled and said, "Thank you, Your Highness Li Kuangtu. I joined the Purgatory of Heaven capital 5 years ago and am now the Chief of Staff of the Purgatory of Heaven capital." "So, you are not from the Li family?" Li Tianlan's voice was cold. "The Purgatory of Heaven capital belongs to the Li family. I belong to the Purgatory of Heaven capital, so naturally, I belong to the Li family." Heavenly Hound smiled and said, "I just don't know if His Majesty Dong Huang still recognizes his identity as a member of the Li family." "I naturally belong to the Li family." Li Tianlan sneered. Li Huazhang frowned slightly and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Heavenly Hound nodded and said in a gentle voice, "It's good that Your Majesty recognizes it. You are naturally a member of the Li family, but not a member of the Li family. I don't know if you recognize this." There was a commotion in the crowd. Li Tianlan frowned. Heavenly Hound seemed to be completely relaxed and said with a sneer, "I have talked about this with His Highness Li Kuangtu. Your Majesty once claimed to be Senior Li's grandson. Everyone regarded you as the young master of the Li family, so you have your current status. In other words, all of us think that His Highness Li Kuangtu is your biological father. But in fact, His Highness Li Kuangtu told me personally that you have no blood relationship with him. Senior Li only has one son, His Highness. But Your Majesty, you are not His Highness' son, so are you a member of the Li family?" The commotion in the crowd strangely calmed down. This matter was no longer a secret, especially for the Purgatory of Heaven capital. It was an open matter. Emperor Dong's palace was like the sun at high noon. But the Purgatory of Heaven capital could not hide its decline in the past 2 years. In order to stabilize his position, Li Guangtu had already made this matter public. This was also one of the reasons why some elders of the Li family were loyal to Li Tianlan but were in a dilemma in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Li Tianlan did not speak. He just looked at Heavenly Hound silently and seemed to be unable to refute. Heavenly Hound's smile gradually widened, and the expression on his wrinkled old face gradually became a little playful. He believed that Li Tianlan did not dare to kill him today. If it was when he first appeared, it was still possible for Li Tianlan to suddenly make a move. But now he had named Li Tianlan's identity. He was a member of the Li family, but he was also an outsider of the Li family. Under this premise, if Li Tianlan killed him, it would only make people think that he was angry out of humiliation, and even offend the public. The most important thing was that Li Guangtu was dead now. If Li Guangtu was alive, Heavenly Hound naturally did not dare to stand up and make irresponsible remarks. But now that Li Guangtu was dead, Heavenly Hound stood up and became a hero who tried his best to defend Li Guangtu's widow and child. This identity was enough to make Li Tianlan not dare to kill him. From this standpoint, once Li Tianlan killed him, he would never be able to take over the Purgatory of Heaven capital. He stood up to defend the interests of Phoenix and Li Huawu, which was to defend the interests of the Li family. At present, no matter what the specific standpoint of everyone was, there were absolutely few people who really wanted Li Tianlan to kill Li Huawu, and even Li Huazhang would not agree. It was not easy for him to reluctantly accept that Li Tianlan killed Li Guangtu. Moreover, the two sides were enemies, and it was natural that there would be life and death. But Li Huawu was just a 2-year-old child, and he had the blood of the Li family. Now he pointed out that Li Tianlan was an outsider. How could these people tolerate Li Tianlan killing Li Huawu? As long as Li Tianlan could not touch Li Huawu and his mother, he could not touch Heavenly Hound. To some extent, he and Zuo were the same, but they were also completely different. Zuo was just a visiting professor of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. This status was not low, but it could not be said to be too high. He could only be regarded as a high-level member of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. He stood up to protect Li Huawu and his mother, and even dared to regard Emperor Dong's palace as a part of the Li family. He was advancing in order to retreat. He was extremely loyal to Li Guangtu. What he did was nothing more than doing his best to protect the interests of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Naturally, he would not want Emperor Dong's palace. He just wanted to keep a small part of the core interests of the Purgatory of Heaven capital as much as possible, so that Li Huawu could have the hope of making a comeback in the future. The Heavenly Hound was the chief of staff of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. This was the absolute core high level of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Its power and status could be said to be in the top 5. In terms of strength, compared to Dawn, the Heavenly Hound was not inferior at all. He protected Li Huawu and his mother, which could be said to be advancing in order to retreat, but what he wanted was to protect the entire Purgatory of Heaven capital. Who in the Purgatory of Heaven capital didn't know Li Tianlan's origin? Zuo naturally knew about it, but he didn't say anything. However, the Heavenly Hound directly pointed out this point. Just from this difference, it could already be seen that the two had completely different motives. The former was really to protect the Lord. The latter was to create a favorable situation for himself and then compete for benefits. The playful expression on the Heavenly Hound's face became more and more obvious. Today's situation was simply good for him. If he didn't seize it, he was afraid that he would be struck by lightning. As far as I know, His Majesty was just a child adopted by Senior Li. Senior Li taught His Majesty martial arts and raised His Majesty. He also sincerely hoped that His Majesty could help the Li family rise. The Heavenly Hound smiled and continued, "Everyone knows a lot of things, but there are also a lot of things that you don't know. His Highness Li Guangtu told me a lot when he was alive. Today, I'll talk to you about Senior Li. In order to let the Li family rise again, Senior Li made 3 arrangements. The first arrangement was naturally His Majesty. He kept His Majesty by his side and taught His Majesty everything that the Li family had learned. And his second arrangement was the Purgatory of Heaven capital. He constantly arranged for the veterans of the Li family to fake their deaths to escape and join the Purgatory of Heaven capital. That's how the present arrangement came about. What we are going to talk about now is the third arrangement. Senior Li secretly adopted a daughter and taught her all the unique skills of the Li family, including the 24 moves of sword, and has been in secret contact with her for many years. At the same time, Senior Li also passed a part of the Li family's secret skills to her. At the same time, Senior Li also secretly gave part of the Li family's property to this adopted daughter. Regarding this, in addition to Senior Li and the adopted daughter, only His Highness Li Guangtu knew about the existence of his adopted sister. The brother and sister had a very good relationship. Although they didn't see each other much, they were like-minded, and both of them were geniuses. At that time, the adopted daughter was in charge of part of the Li family's wealth and received the Li family's martial arts. Coupled with her own outstanding talent, she entered the invincible realm smoothly. The Heavenly Hound laughed. After entering the invincible realm, the adopted daughter set up a force and also set up a fund on the surface. In the crowd, the faces of many elites of the Purgatory of Heaven capital had gradually changed. The clear voice of the Heavenly Hound continued to echo. Everyone should have guessed that the adopted daughter was the master of Samsara Palace. She set up the Samsara Palace and also set up the Flourishing Age Fund on the surface. In fact, today's Emperor Dong's palace originated from the Li family. The relationship between His Highness Li Guangtu and the master of Samsara Palace is very good, which has long been proved. Don't forget that the Purgatory of Heaven capital could appear in the Dark World smoothly and occupy East Island because the Master of Samsara Palace initiated the final battle of Heaven capital. The words of the Heavenly Hound were powerful. The strange atmosphere continued to spread inside the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Some people were thoughtful. Some people were stunned. Some people suddenly understood. Some people were skeptical. The smile of the Heavenly Hound became more and more relaxed. He had expected all this. Everything he said could also be justified in the absence of key evidence. For example, the master of Samsara Palace did know the 24 moves of sword of the Li family, and even her martial arts was the 24 moves of sword. Another example was the final battle of Heaven capital. From the current situation, it seemed that the Samsara Palace was indeed helping the Purgatory of Heaven capital to officially enter the secular world. These could all be explained. As for the truth, did it matter? Li Honghe was dead and would not deny him. Li Guangtu was dead and would not deny him. The master of Samsara Palace was dead and would not deny him. Without these key witnesses, what could Li Tianlan use to deny him? Moreover, would the dignified Dong Wang argue with him until he was flushed with anger? How could it be possible? The number 1 on the world divine list was invincible. Such an expert would definitely disdain to argue with him. But in the current situation, it was not appropriate for him to kill him. In such a deadlock, the best choice for Li Tianlan was to leave temporarily. The Heavenly Hound took 2 steps forward, with unconcealable pride in his eyes. As long as Li Tianlan left, he would become the hero who protected Li Huawu and his mother today. As the chief of staff of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, he naturally had his own forces in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Li Tianlan wanted to leave today. In order to save his face, he would inevitably take away a group of people who were loyal to him led by Li Huazhang. Daybreak and Dawn were seriously injured. The Purgatory of Heaven capital was in a mess. This was what the Heavenly Hound wanted most. He just waited for Li Tianlan to leave, and then he would kill Daybreak by all means. The seriously injured Dawn was nothing to worry about. Next, he would use the power of the Purgatory of Heaven capital to promote the brother-sister relationship between the master of Samsara Palace and Li Guangtu, and then to promote that Li Huawu was the legitimate heir of the Li family. It was unlikely for Li Huawu to inherit Emperor Dong's palace. No matter what, Li Tianlan could not be a man without a temper. But as long as he occupied this legitimate position, the Heavenly Hound could at least guarantee that he could keep the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Now, no matter how down and out the purgatory of heaven capital was, it was still the foundation of a superpower, representing power and wealth that others could not imagine. As long as he could control the purgatory of heaven capital, he would become one of the most powerful people in the dark world. It would be better if he could force Emperor Dong's palace to give up part of its power. The Heavenly Hound's eyes suddenly became extremely hot. He glanced at Phoenix without anyone noticing. Phoenix seemed to have not come to her senses yet. She stood there blankly, with an unconcealable sadness and weakness on her mature and beautiful face. The Heavenly Hound's eyes swept over Phoenix's face and her graceful body curves. As long as everything went well today, the purgatory of heaven capital would be his, and the mistress that he secretly coveted would also be his. As long as he stabilized the purgatory of heaven capital, he would enter her and Li Guangtu's bedroom as soon as possible, and completely conquer the beautiful and mature mistress in their bed. The Heavenly Hound's eyes turned and fell on Li Tianlan. He said with a smile, "I don't know if your majesty has doubts about the friendliness of the Samsara palace. But no matter what, this is the truth. Young Master Huawu can inherit everything of the Li family, including Emperor Dong's palace, because it is a part of the Li family." Li Tianlan was lost in thought. Anger? He really didn't have this kind of emotion. If Li Tianlan hadn't had access to some information about the Flourishing Age Fund, maybe he would have believed the Heavenly Hound's words. Grandpa's adopted daughter? Li Guangtu's adopted sister? Everything about the Samsara palace had nothing to do with Li Tianlan. The Arabian Nights was unimaginable, a bunch of nonsense. Except for military counselor, no one in the world could really understand the Flourishing Age Fund. It was an empire of wealth hidden in the dark. What was exposed to the outside was just the tip of the iceberg. And this tip of the iceberg seemed to be written with Li Tianlan's name after the Samsara palace was merged into the East Emperor Palace. But there were more hidden wealth, the shares that were secretly purchased from the major groups, and all the secrets that others couldn't find out. Li Tianlan was the real owner. From the beginning to the end. There was no so-called transfer. From the very beginning, when the master of Samsara Palace got those interests, on those secret contracts, Li Tianlan's name was written, not the Li family's. Similarly, in many places, the master of Samsara Palace also left many traps specifically for the Li family. She obviously considered the existence of Li Guangtu. These traps were aimed at Li Guangtu and the power of the Li family. In the plan of the master of Samsara Palace, if Li Tianlan really failed in the battle with Li Guangtu, even if Li Tianlan's martial arts were all destroyed, as long as he was alive, he could use these traps to cause unimaginable huge trouble for the Li family when it annexed the Flourishing Age Fund. The intention behind this was self-evident. So, Li Guangtu and the master of Samsara Palace had a deep sibling relationship? It was better to say that Gu Xingyun was Wang Tianzong's long-lost younger brother. Moreover, even if there were none of these things, when the Purgatory of Heaven Capital and the East Emperor Palace existed at the same time, the Flourishing Age Fund chose Li Tianlan instead of Li Guangtu. This alone was enough to disprove the Heavenly Hound's statement. Li Tianlan didn't bother to talk nonsense. He just glanced at Heavenly Hound and said lightly, "Who else thinks the same as this chief of staff? Stand out and let me see." After a moment of silence, a few more people came out. The crowd was even quieter. There were not many people who came out to support Heavenly Hound, only 5 or 6, but they were not unknown people. They were all people in various key positions in the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. They were undoubtedly Heavenly Hound's team. Li Tianlan found that he didn't know any of these people, and he could confirm that they were not old people from the Li family. He was slightly relieved. Heavenly Hound took a step forward, bowed slightly, and said softly, "Thank you for your dedication to the Li family, Your Majesty. Now, please return Emperor Dong's palace. We will assist young Master Huawu to control everything, Your Majesty can rest assured." A blatant seizure of power. Li Tianlan looked at the crowd behind Heavenly Hound. No one clearly supported this small team. But when many people met Li Tianlan's eyes, they subconsciously looked away. Among them, there were many veterans of the Li family that Li Tianlan was familiar with. Li Tianlan understood Heavenly Hound's reliance. Perhaps in the minds of Heavenly Hound and others, he came today to subdue the purgatory of Heaven Capital, not to kill people. After all, in their minds, Li Guangtu was already dead, and it was meaningless to kill others. Instead, it would disappoint these old people of the Li family. So Heavenly Hound and others seemed to stand out fearlessly and clamor for power, but in fact, they wanted to keep the purgatory of Heaven Capital advancing in order to retreat? And these old people of the Li family, Li Tianlan was silent. He could probably understand their silence. In a sense, this could not be called betrayal. Heavenly Hound talked a lot of nonsense, but at least one thing was true. That was, although his name was Li Tianlan, the real situation was that his surname was not Li. He was not the grandson of Li Honghe, nor the son of Li Guangtu. In terms of blood relationship, he was indeed an outsider of the Li family. How important was a surname? When the treason case broke out abruptly, the Li family was full of talents and experts. It was no exaggeration to say that if everyone in the Li family's camp revealed the intention to change sides, it was not difficult for anyone to find another way out. But these people didn't die from the beginning to the end. They followed Li Honghe out of Yuzhou and the highest stage of Zhongzhou state and endured more than 20 years of suffering. Some people faked their deaths to get away, but many others really died on the border. Why did all this? It was for the name Li. When Li Tianlan was Li Honghe's grandson, everyone regarded him as the young master and the future hope of the Li family. Under Li Honghe's will, they were even willing to stand against Li Guangtu for him. But now? His true identity had not been exposed. But Li Guangtu had already said that Li Tianlan had nothing to do with him. In such a situation, Li Tianlan had nothing to do with Li Guangtu, which meant that he had no blood relationship with the Li family in many people's minds. Some people could accept this and choose to follow Li Honghe's will to stand by Li Tianlan. There were some such people in Emperor Dong's palace. There were also some in the purgatory of Heaven Capital headed by Li Huazhang. And the others, they didn't want to choose Li Guangtu, especially after Li Guangtu chose to cooperate with Gu Xingyan. But they were also entangled in the issue of Li Tianlan's identity. So at this moment, facing Li Tianlan, they could only remain silent. Uncle Huiyun, do you agree with Heavenly Hound? Li Tianlan began to call names directly. His eyes fell on a one-armed middle-aged man. This was an old man of the Li family whom Li Tianlan was very familiar with. He left the border camp a year earlier than Li Tianlan and had a very good relationship with him. Compared with Li Tianlan's somewhat indifferent impression of Li Huazhang, Li Tianlan had more things to remember about this Uncle Huiyun. The first roasted hamster he had eaten when he was a child was given to him by this uncle. In that camp, it was already an extremely rare delicacy. The corners of Huiyun's mouth moved, and he felt a little bitter. Your teacher is now in Reki City and will be back soon. Aren't you going to go back with me to see him? Li Tianlan continued to ask. Uncle Huiyun was Fireman's apprentice, which many people knew. He had planned to follow Fireman's path and break through to the invincible realm at the Fire-Flaming Realm. But after the treason case, Fireman was imprisoned in the desert prison. Disheartened, Huiyun entered the thunder-shocking realm. Later, he was injured in a battle at the border and lost an arm. He had no hope of entering the invincible realm. But he should always remember the friendship of those years. God, Uncle Huiyun gave a wry smile and seemed to want to call his name. But as soon as the words came out, he sighed and said hoarsely, Your Majesty, what's your surname? Is it important? Li Tianlan looked into his eyes and said in a soft voice, I grew up in the Li family. Whether I'm related by blood or not, Senior Li will always be my grandfather. I'm a member of the Li family and the current patriarch of the Li family. What's different? It's different, Huiyun murmured. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and said softly, If you insist on an answer, uncle, in terms of blood relationship, my surname should be Dongcheng. He suddenly froze. By now, he had already known his background, but he had been avoiding it. So far, he only knew his surname, but he didn't know what his name was in the Dongcheng clan. Dongcheng. Dongqing clan, Dongqing Rushi? Huiyun froze for a moment, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Vaguely, he seemed to know Li Honghe's plan at that time. Heavenly Hound obviously realized something. His face changed obviously, and he said in a deep voice, "Since your majesty has admitted that your surname is not Li, how can you be the patriarch of the Li family? We can discuss about Emperor Dong's palace slowly, but the purgatory of heaven capital belongs to the Li family. How can it be handed over to the Dongqing clan? How? I'm talking to the senior. What right do you have to interrupt?" Li Tianlan glanced at Heavenly Hound coldly. Heavenly Hound took half a step back subconsciously, then gritted his teeth and stood where he was. He said in a cold voice, "Your Majesty is really overbearing, but as a member of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, don't I even have the right to speak? Your Majesty came here today to conquer the Purgatory of Heaven capital. In any case, I, Heavenly Hound, will be the first to be unconvinced." "Conquer the Purgatory of Heaven capital," Li Tianlan murmured to himself, and then suddenly laughed. He looked at Heavenly Hound, and the temperature in his eyes dropped little by little, getting colder and colder. "Who told you that I came here today to conquer the Purgatory of Heaven capital?" Uneasiness rose from Heavenly Hound's heart without warning. He suddenly raised his head. In his sight was Li Tianlan's indifferent face without any expression. "I came here today," Li Tianlan's voice paused. "I came here to kill." The sword energy surged. With Heavenly Hound as the center, the space within a radius of several meters instantly froze. The small team centered on Heavenly Hound was completely enveloped by the sword energy, and no one was missing. The sword energy extended without any warning, but Sui Xian, who had just spoken, was missed. The faces of Heavenly Hound and the others changed dramatically, and they almost instinctively broke out with all their strength. The blue arc of lightning flashed in the sword energy for a moment. Humph! Li Tianlan snorted coldly. The sword energy around them suddenly rotated. It was silent. The flashing arc of lightning was completely extinguished. Heavenly Hound, whose eyes were full of remorse, opened his mouth. "Your Majesty, please." Before he could finish his words, the layers of sword chi had already streaked across each of their bodies like streams of light. Their bodies were torn apart silently. Blood gushed out. The dense sword light kept flying. Before the pieces of the corpses and blood fell to the ground, they had been completely smashed into pieces of powder by the endless sword energy. The red powder fell to the ground, and it was dark red. The audience was silent. Before everyone came to their senses, Li Tianlan's voice continued to ring. "At the same time, let Li Guangtu see what kind of state the Purgatory of Heaven capital is now." Phoenix's body suddenly shook. She looked up at Li Tianlan and said in a hoarse voice, "What did you say?" "Tianlan, Guangtu is not dead?" Li Huazhang also came to his senses and asked hurriedly. "He's still alive." Li Tianlan nodded. "If I didn't say that he was dead, how could I see today's good show?" His mood was up and down. The crowd became more and more silent. Li Tianlan glanced at Huiyun again. It seemed that he was talking to him, but also to all the elders of the Li family. "In terms of blood, I am indeed an outsider of the Li family, but Rushi is Grandpa's biological granddaughter and Li Guangtu's biological daughter. You can go to Emperor Dong's palace to find Li Guangtu and ask if it is true. Like Grandpa, I despise Li Guangtu. But this man's pride and stubbornness have not changed for many years. At least he still has a sense of shame. You can ask if Rushi is his daughter, and you can ask if he really has a deep sibling relationship with the master of Samsara Palace." Li Tianlan's body slowly rose into the air. "Grandpa doesn't approve of Li Guangtu, and the future of the Li family has nothing to do with him. But Rushi is my woman, and her health is slowly improving. In the future, the child of Rushi and me will naturally be the heir of the Li family and the future patriarch of the Li family." In the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, the sword energy that blocked the sky dissipated silently. "That's all I have to say. From today on, the Purgatory of Heaven capital will be free. You can choose your side freely." Those who choose to return to Emperor Dong's palace are still my uncles and aunties. Those who stand on the opposite side of Emperor Dong's palace are my enemies from now on." His figure took a step forward in the air and disappeared instantly. The next second, Li Tianlan's body appeared in the bedroom of the villa in the center of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The spacious bedroom was surrounded by the faint body fragrance of a woman, which seemed to be the smell of phoenix. In a small bed beside the big bed, a child who looked only 2 or 3 years old was sleeping soundly. Li Tianlan looked at the child quietly, his eyes extremely calm. He took a step forward and stretched out his finger. Chapter 1257. The moment when his fingers were about to fall. In the slightly narrow room, the sudden surge of mental power exploded into a pure and sharp sword aura. The sword energy was dense and sharp, spreading in every corner of the room. The tea table, the chair, the dining table, and the tea were completely shattered, and the water splashed in the air. For a moment, it seemed that everything in the room had become a sword, and all of them rushed to Li Tianlan. "What the fuck do you want to do? Li Tianlan, if you dare to touch Huawu, I will make you pay." The violent and suppressed roar echoed in the room, and Li Guangtu's body rushed over with the flying sword energy. Li Tianlan's body moved. There was a slight sound of civilization in the room. A transparent air vortex rotated rapidly with Li Tianlan as the center, and the sword energy rushing from behind all pierced into the vortex and became a part of it. The transparent vortex expanded, and the edge hit Li Guangtu hard, directly sweeping his body out. The expanding vortex covered half of the room, and also Li Huaqing, who was standing beside Li Tianlan. Li Guangtu, whose body hit the wall hard, looked pale, but instantly turned red. He stared at Li Tianlan with a twisted expression, with monstrous anger. Look, he's anxious." Li Tianlan pointed to Li Guangtu and said to Li Huaqing. Li Huaqing's mouth twitched, and he didn't speak. He squinted and quietly looked at the bright screen in front of him. The huge screen was clear and bright, showing the bedroom on the other side of the screen perfectly in front of them. There was another Li Tianlan on the screen. At this time, he was standing in front of the baby's crib, stretching out his finger and gently tapping the face of the sleeping baby. The 2-year-old child moved in a daze and turned over, but he didn't wake up. Instead, he stretched out 2 chubby little hands in his sleep and held Li Tianlan's finger. Inside and outside the screen, a smile appeared on the lips of the 2 Li Tianlan at the same time. "No matter how complicated the grudge between us is, I won't go so far as to attack a child. Why are you nervous?" Li Tianlan slowly turned around and glanced at Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu snorted and struggled to stand up. His physical condition was extremely poor. He had never recovered from the serious injuries he suffered in the chaos of Snow Country. He was even more seriously injured in the battle in North Sea. Later, he participated in the siege of Li Tianlan. If Xianyuan Wushang hadn't taken action after he was captured, Li Guangtu wouldn't have woken up now. He had been held captive for more than a month, and Li Guangtu had been trying to recover from his injuries. Naturally, there was some effect, but with the forced attack just now, his injuries suddenly worsened again. "What do you want?" Li Guangtu looked into Li Tianlan's eyes and asked. Li Tianlan's expression was calm, and his eyes seemed deep and empty. But looking at Li Tianlan's expression now, he couldn't capture anything. If he wasn't very familiar with the 24 moves of sword, Li Guangtu wouldn't even be sure that what was left in Emperor Dong's palace was just a sword chi doppelganger. Xianyuan City, Tiandu City. The 2 cities were hundreds of kilometers apart. Li Tianlan's real body went to the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but the sword chi doppelganger could still move around in Emperor Dong's palace. The most exaggerated thing was that the 2 sides were obviously connected to each other. That was to say, Li Tianlan's real body knew what was happening here. Every word he said was equivalent to Li Tianlan communicating with him through the sword chi doppelganger hundreds of kilometers away. In a sense, this was no longer something that could be explained by pure martial arts. Not to mention that he hadn't broken through, even if Li Tianlan really entered that supreme realm, he couldn't do this. Now the real body and the doppelganger were so far away from each other, but they could still communicate with each other. The only explanation was that Ruthless, or Xianyuan Feng, was here. Ruthless energy had been used up, but it was not completely gone. Its remaining energy was enough to stimulate the activity on the sword body, and then carry Li Tianlan's sword qi to form a special sword qi doppelganger. And the ability to do this also proved that the relationship between Xianyuan Feng and Li Tianlan could no longer be said to be a simple relationship between man and sword. The bond between man and sword was constantly deepening. Now Xianyuan Feng could almost be said to be a part of Li Tianlan's body. Li Tianlan picked up the remote control and turned off the screen in front of him. What would happen next in the purgatory of heaven capital hundreds of kilometers away, except for Li Tianlan, Li Guangtu and Li Huaqing could no longer see. Li Guangtu's heart sank slightly. What do I want? Didn't I make it clear enough? Li Tianlan said calmly, I want the purgatory of heaven capital. Now I can let you go. After returning to the headquarters of the purgatory of heaven capital, I will announce that the purgatory of heaven capital is officially incorporated into Emperor Dong's palace. The overall structure of the purgatory of heaven capital will be retained. I will only select a part of the core personnel to enter Emperor Dong's palace. From now on, you can become the first deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace. At the same time, the purgatory of heaven capital will still be under your leadership. Emperor Dong's palace will not interfere with the development of the purgatory of heaven capital. But when necessary, the purgatory of heaven capital must be under my command. As long as Emperor Dong's palace exists, the name of the purgatory of heaven capital will exist. After your death, Huawu will completely inherit the purgatory of heaven capital and maintain a higher degree of freedom. After a pause, Li Tianlan continued, I don't like roundabout things, and I don't like negotiations. But after knowing of your existence, I've always wanted to talk to you. I didn't want to see you before because I was giving you the cold shoulder, hoping that you could calm down. Between you and me, there's no need to play the game of asking for a sky-high price and returning the money on the spot. I've given you the conditions, and this is my bottom line. Grandpa asked me to take charge of the Li family before he died, so I have the obligation to take all the power of the Li family into my hands. The purgatory of heaven capital must be incorporated into Emperor Dong's palace, just as I said. If you say anything else, I won't agree. What I can decide is what I told you, and it is also the structure of Emperor Dong's palace in the future. In Li Guangtu's silence, Li Tianlan simply summarized, if I am Zhongzhou State, you are Beihai. This was Li Tianlan's attitude. It was clear, without any leeway, aggressive, but it also gave Li Guangtu enough space. What he wanted was the integrity of the Li family, to conquer the purgatory of heaven capital, and to conquer Li Guangtu. But he would not interfere too much with the internal affairs of the purgatory of heaven capital and give it a high degree of freedom. But nominally, the purgatory of heaven capital must belong to Emperor Dong's palace and become a subsidiary force of Emperor Dong's palace. And when necessary, that is, when facing foreign enemies, the purgatory of heaven capital must unite with Emperor Dong's palace against foreign enemies. It was equivalent to the relationship between Zhongzhou State and Beihai Province today. However, when these conditions were listed one by one, Emperor Dong's palace gave more restrictions to the purgatory of heaven capital than Zhongzhou State gave to Beihai. But these extra restrictions were for better control of the purgatory of heaven capital. In other words, as long as the purgatory of heaven capital was dominated by the Li family and Emperor Dong's palace, the purgatory of heaven capital was highly free. Li Tianlan felt that he had done his best in this condition, and the conditions in all aspects were also very mature. Emperor Dong's palace had fully developed, and it was the era of Emperor Dong. In front of everyone in Emperor Dong's palace, there was a beautiful picture of mountains and rivers. Zhongzhou State, Tiannan, East Island, Europe, America. Time passed, and the shadow of Emperor Dong's palace would spread to the whole world over time. Such a Emperor Dong's palace had completely suppressed the purgatory of heaven capital in terms of influence, talent reserve, high-end combat capability, wealth, and intelligence channels. And Li Tianlan himself had reached the top of the divine list. The siege also fully showed that Li Tianlan's personal combat capability had completely surpassed Li Guangtu's. Throughout the hundreds of years of the Li family, Li Tianlan could now be said to be the strongest patriarch. And now he had caught Li Guangtu, controlled his life and death, and controlled the life and death of his children. Under such circumstances, he gave Li Guangtu his own conditions. If Li Guangtu still refused, then no matter what happened in the future, he would basically not change his attitude. This was the final negotiation between the two branches of the Li family, and Li Huaqing was the witness. And Li Tianlan also gave conditions that were not difficult to accept, including what he had just told Li Guangtu, the high degree of freedom after the Purgatory of Heaven capital joined Emperor Dong's palace, and his position in Emperor Dong's palace. The first deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace was completely under Li Tianlan. With Li Tianlan's temperament, since he gave him this position, it was impossible that he would not dare to give him the responsibility he should bear. So Li Guangtu did not have to worry about having no real power in Emperor Dong's palace. There were 3 deputy palace lords in Emperor Dong's palace: Saint, Hidden God, and Li Shi. What did this mean? First of all, Saint used to be the first senior brother of Mount Shu. The 4 sword masters of Mount Shu were now in different positions, but they had a very good personal relationship with each other. Now Yin Qinshi, the phantom sword master, was in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. If Li Guangtu was willing to join Emperor Dong's palace, Saint would not take the initiative to make things difficult for Li Guangtu because of his relationship with Yin Qinshi. In the same way, Li Beidian would not make things difficult for Li Guangtu. Situ Cangyue, the hidden god of Zhongzhou state, was Li Guangtu's confidant many years ago. Now she chose to stand on Li Tianlan's side. After Li Guangtu joined, no matter whether the two could get back together or not, the old friendship would always be there. In the case of not violating the principle, Situ Cangyue would also support Li Guangtu to a certain extent. Li Shi's situation was even more complicated. The grievances between her and Li Guangtu were enough to be written in a book. But if they were really in the same camp, Li Shi might not fully support Li Guangtu, but at least she would not make things difficult for him. Such a situation could be said to be very good. As long as Li Guangtu was willing to come with the Purgatory of Heaven capital, he did not have to worry about whether he could gain a foothold in Emperor Dong's palace or not. He could quickly establish his own prestige in Emperor Dong's palace and work together with Li Tianlan to make Emperor Dong's palace better, to make the Li family surpass the peak of the past hundreds of years, and to create a new situation. The high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace would not make things difficult for him. With the Purgatory of Heaven capital and his own strength, he could become a super heavyweight in Emperor Dong's palace, and his status was only below Li Tianlan. The most important thing was, it was the condition that Li Tianlan did not tell him, but he heard through the screen. Dongqing Rushi was his daughter. Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi's future child would inherit the Li family. If Li Tianlan was an outsider, then the child born by Dongqing Rushi could definitely be regarded as the blood of the Li family. So, what was there for Li Guangtu to be dissatisfied with? Li Guangtu was silent and seemed to be thinking. But there was silence in his eyes. Li Tianlan waited patiently for a full 5 minutes before he calmly said, "Agree or refuse? You won't kill me, will you?" Li Guangtu suddenly laughed. He looked at Li Huaqing, who had been silent, and said, "President, he won't kill me, will he?" Li Huaqing, who had been watching silently, chuckled and did not speak. He naturally wanted to save Li Guangtu's life. But now that he said this, there was no doubt that he was making the decision for Li Tianlan. At this time, how could Li Huaqing make such a mistake? We all understand. Li Guangtu's smile gradually widened. Although I don't know what happened outside, I know that the president has lived here for a while. What is worth him doing this? He looked at Li Tianlan and said lightly, "I think I still have some value, so if I'm not wrong, the president came for me. Right? He wants you to let me go. And you don't intend to let me go, so you have a conflict?" Li Tianlan did not speak, just looked at him silently. "So as long as the president is still here, it means that the parliament can use me, so you dare not kill me." Li Tianlan still did not speak. Today, he and Li Huaqing came to see Li Guangtu. Naturally, it was not a sudden idea. It was the first time that Li Huaqing came to him after living here for so long, and he seriously asked to see Li Guangtu. With Qin Weibai's previous reminder, Li Tianlan naturally understood that the other party was going to have a showdown with him. But Qin Weibai said that something would happen in Yuzhou these days. But now Emperor Dong's palace had not received any news. Li Huaqing's showdown with him this time seemed a little sudden. But Li Tianlan was ready, and there was no reason to refuse him, so he came here with Li Huaqing. He gave him the conditions. And the timing was perfect. Whether he would be an enemy or a friend in the future depended on Li Guangtu's choice. He had spared Li Guangtu's life, and now he gave him the best opportunity. If he still could not grasp it, Li Tianlan did not think he could do more. I refuse. Li Guangtu looked at Li Tianlan and said with a smile, maybe the conditions you offer are very tempting, but this is not what I want. In this world, only I am qualified to represent the Li family. Even if I am not your opponent for the time being, you are not qualified to represent the Li family. If I can't beat you, I will join you. If I, Li Guangtu, am such a person, I don't deserve today's achievements. The Li family was stubborn. Li Guangtu was not only stubborn, but also completely extreme. Li Tianlan took a deep look at him. Li Guangtu's eyes were full of persistence, and behind this persistence, there was also a touch of hatred. Li Tianlan naturally did not know that the teenager named Huawu died in the final battle of Heaven Capital, and he did not want to know. What he knew was the current result. Li Guangtu chose to refuse. Don't you worry about the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital? Don't you worry about your woman and son? Li Tianlan asked. Does it make sense? Li Guangtu's smile remained unchanged, and his voice was indifferent. You kill them, and you'd better kill me. From today on, the Li family will be destroyed with me. Otherwise, if I don't die today, if you dare to touch them, ha ha ha. I am indeed not your opponent, but in the whole Emperor Dong's palace, who else can be my opponent except you? Li Tianlan nodded. You refuse? Only I can represent the Li family. Li Guangtu said indifferently, I refuse. His attitude was clear, and there was no room for negotiation. Li Tianlan nodded and slowly turned around. He glanced at Li Huaqing. Li Huaqing was also looking at him. His eyes were a little relaxed and a little expectant. Li Tianlan nodded to him and said, You talk. He had finished talking with Li Guangtu. This was also the only time they had a formal conversation. He gave the conditions. Li Guangtu chose to refuse. That was all. It was simple. Li Tianlan walked slowly to the door. When he was about to go out, he paused and said calmly, I won't kill you today, but from today on, you and I are enemies. Chapter 1258. The sound of the door closing was very slight. This showed that Li Tianlan did not have any anger or unwillingness when he left. It was simple to come and simple to leave. Li Tianlan put forward the conditions. Li Guangtu refused his conditions. The future of the Li family, countless people, countless related families, the pattern of the dark world, unimaginable interests, the future path of the Li family, and the future situation. All of this was like the most ordinary business. They didn't agree on a price, so they parted ways. There was no regret or anger in his words. There might be regret, but it was far from enough to make people turn back. Li Guangtu sat on the ground without any image, leaning against the wall for a long time. Then he took out a pack of cigarettes from his trouser pocket and lit one silently. Through the lingering smoke, Li Huaqing's figure seemed to be a little blurred. Li Guangtu suddenly smiled and said indifferently, Am I free now? You're not really free until you leave Emperor Dong's palace. Li Huaqing sat down on the sofa and said with a smile, You sit down, too. I've always wanted to talk to you, but I never had a chance. Today is not the right time, but the occasion is very suitable and safe. Besides, with Tianlan's character, he won't eavesdrop on us. Li Guangtu thought about it, stood up, and sat opposite Li Huaqing. He puffed out the smoke and remained silent. I'm curious. Li Huaqing said slowly, why didn't you agree with Tianlan? To be honest, I never thought of the conditions he put forward. The autonomy of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, the first deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, and the future heir of the Li family, what are you dissatisfied with? Pride, paranoia, unwillingness? These could be said to be reasons, but they were not decisive reasons. The three people who put forward this condition, heard this condition, and witnessed this condition, all knew very well what this condition meant. Once Li Guangtu accepted it, although he, the first deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace, would be under Li Tianlan, the Purgatory of Heaven capital would maintain a pretty good autonomy. Even if Li Tianlan would take away part of the core of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, at least he had to ensure the normal structure of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. That was to say, the framework of the Purgatory of Heaven capital would not change. At least the three top masters, Daybreak, Dawn, and Phoenix, would stay. The elite forces of Life Prolonging, Undying, and Sanluo temples would also stay. Part of the industries and intelligence agencies of the Purgatory of Heaven capital would also stay. Although Li Guangtu became the deputy palace lord, he could still completely lead the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Although Li Tianlan was the palace lord and could control the Purgatory of Heaven capital to a certain extent, he could not interfere in everything. With the position of the first deputy palace lord and the identities of the other deputy palace lords, Li Guangtu could not only control the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but also control Emperor Dong's palace to a certain extent. It was impossible for Emperor Dong's palace to settle accounts after the fall, be made a mere figurehead, get rid of the donkey when it was no longer of use, and burn the bridge after crossing the river. Every word of Li Tianlan's condition revealed his sincerity. The two sides exchanged resources at the bottom line. When Li Tianlan could control the Purgatory of Heaven capital to a certain extent, Li Guangtu could also control Emperor Dong's palace to a certain extent. This was a real win-win situation, a real integration. The Li family would be reunited into one, which was the best situation. And if this merger was successful, both the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace would be greatly strengthened, which was good for both of them. In this state, as long as Li Guangtu gave up his current thoughts and did not target Li Tianlan could not target him again. No matter how much Li Guangtu disliked Li Tianlan, he could just wait. The next patriarch of the Li family was the daughter of Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi, Li Guangtu's grandson. Under the circumstances that Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi's names were unlikely to be changed, when the child was born, he would not call Li Guangtu grandfather, but grandfather. And if he sincerely joined Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan could accept him. Even if he did not call him father, he would treat him as an elder. In this way, when the child took over, the grievances between Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu would naturally disappear. Similarly, with the child taking over, the entanglement between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace would be meaningless. Li Huawu's branch could also naturally integrate into the Li family, and there would be no distinction between them. As long as Li Guangtu did not treat himself as an outsider. Then no one in Emperor Dong's palace would treat him as an outsider. What was wrong with such a result? But Li Guangtu actually refused. Li Tianlan was not a very aggressive person, but Li Huaqing still did not expect that he would give Li Guangtu such an excellent condition. This was completely impossible in Li Huaqing's mind. After all, everyone could see that the strength of Emperor Dong's palace was now far greater than that of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The condition that Li Tianlan mentioned could only be put forward when the strength of the two sides was equal. But now, it was completely unnecessary. Now Li Tianlan insisted on taking over Emperor Dong's palace and hardened his heart to let more people die on both sides. Throwing Li Guangtu a guest position with no real power seemed to be a very good choice. But Li Tianlan did not beat around the bush. When he had completely gained the upper hand and even controlled the life and death of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, he gave Li Guangtu such a condition. What made Li Huaqing even more puzzled was that Li Guangtu actually refused. The Li family was stubborn? Was this kind of stubbornness a fool? Li Huaqing looked at Li Guangtu smoking another cigarette, but he didn't mean to give one to himself. He shook his head, took out a cigarette box, and lit one. You should be very clear that he can't have better conditions. He can't give you the position of the palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace. He can't give you this, and what he gives you is the best. You can feel this kind of sincerity. So, why? Why? A very complicated light flashed in Li Guangtu's eyes. There were too many reasons to tell Li Huaqing why. He took a deep drag on the cigarette, and the smoke slowly came out of his nostrils and mouth. Li Guangtu smiled. So, he is still too young. He brought you here to talk to me. There are 3 people here, but you didn't speak, so he regarded this negotiation as a matter of 2 people. Li Guangtu squinted at Li Huaqing. I believe that Li Tianlan is not so scheming now. There are some things that he can't figure out for the time being. After all, he is still not mature enough. But don't you understand? Li Huaqing was silent. Qin Weibai? Li Guangtu suddenly asked. I don't know. Li Huaqing shook his head. Li Guangtu sneered, and his voice was a little cold. She is a disaster to the country and the people. That witch deserves to die. Li Huaqing couldn't help laughing. Witch? Everything she did was for Tianlan. Not to mention a little infamy, even if there were more things, as long as it was beneficial to Tianlan, she would not hesitate to do it. You hate her to the bone, but doesn't she hate you to the bone? You have tried to kill her man many times. Do you still want to be extravagant? Do you expect her to give you a good end? To be able to meet such a woman is your luck, fortune, and destiny. If you had such a woman by your side all those years ago, how could you appear here today? Li Huaqing was silent. At this moment, he thought of Li Shi. The woman who was really willing to let him give up a lot of things to protect. In the battle at the border that year, the Li family collapsed, and the winner took all. But now looking back, if Li Shi had helped him with all her strength at that time instead of choosing to stab him at the most critical moment, what would the result be? Li Guangtu took a deep breath and didn't speak. His face was gloomy. If I hadn't come with Tianlan, would you have agreed to his conditions? Li Huaqing looked at Li Guangtu and asked. At this moment, there seemed to be a lot of things hidden in his eyes. Li Guangtu sneered. If I had agreed to his conditions, would you have let me and the purgatory of heaven capital live? Li Huaqing didn't speak. He sat there quietly, as calm as the ocean. The answer is obvious, isn't it? Li Guangtu said in a mocking tone, President, you and I are of the same generation. When I was at the height of my success, you had just started. When you had a meteoric rise, I had been knocked down from the clouds to the dust. But I know far more about Jianghu State and you than Li Tianlan. Jianghu State's evaluation of you is that you are gentle and stable. This evaluation is indeed correct, but it is only one side of it. At the critical moment, your former opponents are very clear about how ruthless you are. Those who have really paid attention to you are also very clear about it. After I joined Emperor Dong's palace, and the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace merged into one, the power in Li Tianlan's and my hands has more than doubled. Li Tianlan, me, Lin Fengting, Li Shi, Zhan Yue, Saint, Daybreak, Military Counselor, Dawn, Phoenix, Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, Yun Qinshi, Li Baidian, Bai Yuming. After all the hidden dangers of the Li family are eliminated, what kind of strength is this to put out this lineup? Not to mention this era, even in the peak of the Wang family of Beihai, I'm talking about the period when the Wang family of Beihai had the Li family. Can Beihai resist our lineup? The combination of this lineup means that Emperor Dong's palace and the purgatory of heaven capital will no longer have any opponents in the dark world. It means that Li Tianlan and I will really keep our word in the special warfare system of Jianghu State. It means that we can instantly unify Tiannan. It means that we can directly recapture East Island. It means that we can directly conquer Beihai. Can you sleep with such a lineup in front of you? What's the point of winning over Jiang Shangyu and protecting Gu Xingyun in front of such a lineup? It's meaningless. Li Huaqing said with a serious face. If it's meaningless, it can't exist. Li Guangtu said blandly, it's not Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun that can't exist, but me and even Emperor Dong's palace. In the final analysis, it's the Li family. According to the character of the current young patriarch of Beihai, stability should be the priority in the next few years. And with all due respect, in the past 2 years, you and Chen Fangqing have tortured them a lot. Chen Fangqing is dead, so the resentment will naturally focus on you. The young patriarch doesn't like you either. They may have conflicts with Emperor Dong's palace in the future, but they will definitely not stand on the side of Zhongzhou state, so you can't win over the Wang family of Beihai. And if the Purgatory of Heaven capital merges with Emperor Dong's palace, you can't find a force that can balance us in the whole Zhongzhou state or even the whole dark world, let alone a force that has the courage to stand against us in the open. The combination of Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun is not weak. At most, you can win over Wang Xiaoyao. If I recover from my injury, I can beat Jiang Shangyu. Although Gu Xingyun is tricky, Li Shi can also balance him. If Wang Xiaoyao takes action, Wang Wuxianga will not sit back and do nothing. Morade's identity is special. Even if you dare to let him join Zhongzhou state openly, other invincible realm experts in Emperor Dong's palace can kill him. In this way, Li Tianlan has no opponent. Even Jiang Shangyu can't bear this kind of pressure. And once such a phenomenon appears, it proves that the Li family after the merger of the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace has been out of control and completely out of the control of Zhongzhou state. President, I know you very well. You won't allow this to happen. Li Guangtu smiled and said, if I really agree, you will stop it. If you can't stop it, then the overall power of Zhongzhou state will probably attack the Li family in all aspects. Emperor Dong's palace will suffer heavy losses, and so will the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But in the end, it's the Li family that will be weakened as a whole, right? After all, that silly boy is too young and not mature enough. He dotes on and trusts Qin Weibai too much, so he should have told Qin Weibai his bottom line long ago. Of course, Qin Weibai didn't disappoint his trust. But after all, she is not a member of the Li family, and she doesn't want to understand the Li family. That siren only has Li Tianlan in her eyes, and she doesn't care about anything else. This mentality will also make her go to extremes on anything related to Li Tianlan. She only wants Li Tianlan to be safe, and she doesn't care about anything else. The conditions put forward by Li Tianlan are very good, and I have the possibility to agree. Once I agree, I will first face the suppression of you and Zhongzhou state. Not to mention anything else, just this alone is a risk in Qin Weibai's eyes, so she doesn't want to see this. And I have tried to kill her man many times, so she naturally can't tolerate me. That's why you and that silly boy came to talk to me today. He is now in full swing, like the sun at high noon, so he naturally won't think so much. Tut, this is the good thing about being immature. Young and frivolous, he dares to offend everyone. Our merger will cause Zhongzhou state to be afraid of us. Maybe he doesn't think of it, but he doesn't care. Look, this is Dong Huang's confidence. Qin Weibai is a very smart woman. The smartest thing about her is that she can protect Li Tianlan to the greatest extent, and at the same time, she can make Li Tianlan not feel disgusted with her like she is doing it for his own good. So on this matter, she didn't persuade Li Tianlan, but asked you to come with him. Li Tianlan doesn't care about some things or is too lazy to see clearly, but Qin Weibai knows that I understand. In the face of the all-round suppression of Zhongzhou state, how can we fight? We can't fight. If we really fall out, Li Tianlan and I can barely survive. Zhongzhou state may suffer a great loss, but the Li family will be gone after all. That's my Li family. I'm extreme, paranoid, but also timid. I can see the consequences of what Li Tianlan dares to do, so I don't dare to do it, and I don't dare to agree to his conditions. Qin Weibai can see this, so when you walked into this room with him, the siren already knew the result. I refused Li Tianlan, and in the future, if she wants to kill me or plot against me, she will have no scruples. Li Guangtu's voice was slow, but it was extremely stable and clear. Li Huaqing had been listening in silence. During the whole process, he smoked 2 cigarettes in a row. When Li Guangtu's voice disappeared, he sighed and laughed. So you refused Li Tianlan, to some extent, to protect him? I am protecting the Li family. Li Guangtu's voice was cold. In some ways, he and Li Tianlan had always had a tacit understanding. For example, he could use external forces to deal with Li Tianlan, and even join forces with Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun, but he had never touched Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan could be merciless to him, but from beginning to end, at least before today, he had never targeted other people in the purgatory of Heaven capital. In their hearts, each other's industries were their future industries, so both sides had a tacit understanding to protect these. Today, although Li Tianlan killed a few people in the purgatory of Heaven capital, none of them were from the Li family. They were just high-level officials of the purgatory of Heaven capital. He could fight with Li Tianlan to the death, but under the overall situation, he could not allow others to plot against the Li family. I suddenly think of the chaos in Snow Country. Li Huaqing smiled and said, if you had known this day would come, would you still have lent your sword to Li Tianlan in Snow Country? Chaos in Snow Country's trial day. It was because of the sword that Li Guangtu lent to Li Tianlan that Li Tianlan could control Li Guangtu's sword energy with perfect sword intent to rush out of the desperate situation, and let the trial day come to an end. Yes. Li Guangtu said lightly, at that time, he could be said to have lost the face of the Li family. After all, it was too ugly. Paranoid. Li Huaqing seemed to have completely understood the meaning of this word in the Li family. He nodded slowly and said, is this the reason you refused Li Tianlan? This is a reason you can accept. Li Huaqing said calmly. Reason? If he wanted to say it, he could say a lot. From the very beginning, he was not convinced that Li Honghe put all his chips on Li Tianlan. In Li Honghe's plan, everything in the purgatory of Heaven capital was prepared for Li Tianlan. As Li Honghe's biological son, Li Guangtu was just a transitional figure. How could he be convinced? In the Qinyan temple in Linhen, the dragon vein guarded by Master Xian Xuanzi had pulled him back from death. If the dragon vein condensed the fate of Zhongzhou state was given to him, then in the final battle of Heaven capital, his first move was enough to defeat Wang Tianzong and the Wang family of Beihai. But the dragon vein was finally given to Li Tianlan by the old bald ass. How could he be willing? He was a young boy, an outsider of the Li family. Why did he do that? This was jealousy. Li Guangtu never denied this. He was jealous of everything Li Tianlan had since he was a child, which should have been his. So he held the purgatory of Heaven capital in his hand tightly, trying to seize the opportunity to make the boy who occupied everything he had disappear completely. Li Tianlan entered the secular world. The chaos in East Island began. Before he could do anything, the Samsara Palace had blocked the gate of the purgatory of Heaven capital. So the final battle of Heaven capital changed from killing Li Tianlan to cooperating with the Samsara Palace to let the purgatory of Heaven capital enter the secular world smoothly. And all this was because of the Samsara Palace, because of a woman who even he was amazed by, who was known as a goddess in the dark world. At that time, Li Guangtu understood that even if he held the purgatory of Heaven capital tightly, the young boy he had always been jealous of and looked down upon would stand up again in another direction with the power of a woman, and then become his biggest opponent to control the Li family. Li Guangtu's failure was because of women. Li Tianlan's success was also because of women. The contrast was so obvious. How could Li Guangtu not be jealous? There was also his first son, whom he had high hopes for and had already raised. Huawu, who died in Ninghu. Some clues almost pointed to the Samsara Palace. Although there was no evidence, what evidence did people like Li Guangtu need? The most important thing was join Emperor Dong's palace. Li Guangtu didn't want to. If he didn't want to, he didn't want to. They were all reasons. Every one of them was a reason. As for joining Emperor Dong's palace, Li Guangtu couldn't think of an excuse to convince himself to ignore these reasons. It doesn't matter. Li Huaqing smiled and said, at least this reason is true, and I can accept it. So? I'm free? Li Guangtu's voice was a little dull. I'll try my best. Li Huaqing said calmly, fight for your freedom. I'm 99% sure that I can take you out of the purgatory of heaven capital today. His voice paused. Li Huaqing looked at him and didn't speak. The premise is, what can you do for me and for Zhongzhou state? Are you optimistic about Li Tianlan? Li Guangtu suddenly asked. To be exact, it's the mature Tianlan that I'm optimistic about. Li Huaqing's expression was very serious. It's strange and contradictory. So, you saved me today for Li Tianlan. Am I right? Li Guangtu suddenly laughed. Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and directly acquiesced. Li Guangtu was a smart man and mature enough. There was no need to hide some things, because they couldn't be hidden at all. I see. Li Guangtu nodded and said, if I join Emperor Dong's palace, the Li family will be out of control and completely out of control. This is not what you want. So, you want me to continue to be an enemy of Emperor Dong's palace? No, to be exact, you want me to continue to join forces with Jiang Shangyu and Gu Xingyun. In this way, the three of us can form a force that can balance Emperor Dong's palace. He stared into Li Huaqing's eyes and said, you saved me just to let Li Tianlan kill me in the future. You want me to be a stumbling block on Li Tianlan's way to help him grow up quickly? Or a whetstone? This is a test for Li Tianlan? Li Guangtu's smile was a little twisted. You're a smart man. Li Huaqing said slowly, do you agree or refuse? I won't be a puppet. Li Guangtu sneered and said, if I leave Emperor Dong's palace, I will integrate all the forces in my hands, try my best to kill Li Tianlan at any cost, and take back the power of the Li family. In this matter, I won't show any mercy. If he dies in my hands, what will you do? Kill me? Li Huaqing looked at him expressionlessly and said coldly, you can kill Tianlan, which naturally proves that you are more valuable than Tianlan. Why should I kill you? In my heart, you are his whetstone, but you can be a knife. Li Guangtu looked into his eyes. Facing his eyes, Li Huaqing didn't give in at all. After a long time, Li Guangtu took a deep breath and slowly nodded. Li Huaqing turned and walked to the door. It was also straightforward. He said, wait for my news. Chapter 1259. The wind in Emperor Dong's palace was soft and comfortable. Li Tianlan sat at the table on the balcony, silently drinking tea and casually enjoying the scenery in Emperor Dong's palace. Qin Weibai, who got up a little late, arranged the fruit plate on the table into a pattern of a smiling face. Her smile was like a flower. Very happy? Li Tianlan asked softly. Yes, as long as you don't bully me, I am happy every day. Qin Weibai chuckled and reached out to touch Li Tianlan's hair. Li Tianlan grabbed her slightly cold and delicate palm and gently bit her fingers. Her white and slender fingers were stained with a little juice. It was fragrant and slightly sweet. Li Tianlan's whole body seemed to melt in this slight touch. He pulled Qin Weibai's body over and sat her on his lap. His other hand naturally wrapped around her waist. Qin Weibai laughed and took out a strawberry from the fruit plate. Do you want to eat it? Li Tianlan shook his head. His and Qin Weibai's eating habits were completely opposite. Qin Weibai usually drank the dew of a special plant that only grew near the polar circle. It was extremely demanding on the environment, temperature, light, and land. Emperor Dong's palace and the Lin clan had now set up this kind of laboratory to cultivate this plant. It cost a lot, but the harvest was not great. This plant could currently grow in Emperor Dong's palace, but Qin Weibai didn't like it very much, so her daily drinking was airlifted from Snow Country or Reki City. When it came to 3 meals a day, most of the time when the workload was not heavy, Qin Weibai's breakfast was usually a small but varied fruit, a piece of egg white, and half a glass of juice. When the workload was heavy, she would add a small steak and a small cup of coffee for breakfast. For lunch, she had 1 or 2 taels of rice, a small bowl of soup, and a few light vegetables. Basically, there was no meat. Most of the dinner was porridge, and occasionally she would eat some desserts she made herself. As for Li Tianlan's diet, fruit? Vegetables? What the hell were those? 3 meals a day, from morning to night, meat, meat, meat. Eating regularly to nourish the stomach were all nonsense. In terms of eating, he didn't like any fruit. The only thing he liked was meat, and he didn't even care about the taste. Qin Weibai took a small bite of the strawberry and laughed again. She sat on Li Tianlan's lap and gently twisted her waist. Are you so happy because of Li Guangtu? Li Tianlan asked suddenly. Qin Weibai was a little confused. She thought about it and nodded. Part of the reason. I don't like this person, and I don't want to be with him. It's good that he can leave Emperor Dong's palace now. Li Tianlan played with her soft long hair and said nothing. Qin Weibai quietly ate the fruit. Her movements were very delicate. After she finished the strawberry in her hand, she picked up a wet towel and wiped her hands. Then, she wrapped her arms around Li Tianlan's neck and said softly, "Are you unhappy?" "Not really." Li Tianlan shook his head. "I gave him the best conditions, but he refused. It's a pity that we didn't reach an agreement." Regarding Li Guangtu, he didn't have any complicated thoughts. He didn't have a good impression of him, but he didn't dislike him much either. He and Li Guangtu were enemies, but Li Guangtu was a very stubborn person. Such people were often very pure. Even if they were enemies, he wasn't the kind of person who would make others gnash their teeth and want to kill him. After all, he is Rushi's father. If there is a chance, I don't want to let him go. If he leaves Emperor Dong's palace today, he will only die in the future. Li Tianlan said softly, and, even if Grandpa doesn't like him, he doesn't want him to go this way. This is his own choice. Qin Weibai reached out and rubbed Li Tianlan's frowning eyebrows. How about the purgatory of heaven capital? There should be a group of people joining Emperor Dong's palace in the near future. Before I came back, I said what I should say. It's understandable that they think I'm an outsider. But Rushi is not. For those who really care about the Li family, they can completely accept that my and Rushi's children will inherit the Li family in the future. This is enough to make some people in the purgatory of heaven capital make up their minds to choose their own side. Li Tianlan said faintly, I don't want to get involved in the affairs of Emperor Dong's palace and the purgatory of heaven capital, and it's not necessary. When Li Guangtu goes back, let's see how many people will choose to come to Emperor Dong's palace. If they are willing to come, they are our people. If they are unwilling to come, they are our enemies. I won't give them too much time. It's not appropriate to move inside Zhongzhou State at this time, so I'll unify Tiannan first. I've built a place for the Li family to live. When I drive the purgatory of heaven capital out of Tiannan, they can't say that I'm heartless. It's good that you know. I'll support you. Qin Weibai smiled sweetly. Li Tianlan nodded, thought for a moment, and suddenly said, Something happened in Yuzhou? Qin Weibai was a little confused. You said that something would happen in Yuzhou in the next few days, so that Li Huaqing would make up his mind to come to me. Li Tianlan's fingers rubbed Qin Weibai's slender waist. Li Huaqing has come, but it seems that nothing has happened in Yuzhou. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and smiled. She said, maybe something has happened, but we can't see it? Of course, it's also possible that Li Huaqing suddenly figured it out. Li Tianlan didn't ask any more questions. He reached into his pocket, but found nothing. Shaking his head, he patted Qin Weibai's butt. Go get a pack of cigarettes. Qin Weibai said, Oh. She stood up and walked to the living room. Her figure swayed lazily, and she looked magnificent. The pleasant bell of the elevator rang for a moment. The elevator door opened. Li Huaqing's figure walked along the corridor to the balcony. Li Tianlan glanced at him and didn't get up. He just nodded and said, Sit down. Li Huaqing calmly sat down on the sofa opposite Li Tianlan. How's the talk? Li Tianlan asked. He gave Li Guangtu a choice. Li Guangtu didn't accept it, so he naturally wouldn't cover the room with sword energy. Now he just needed to know the result, and it didn't matter the process of their negotiation. It was a pleasant talk. Li Huaqing laughed. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly. When he was about to say something, Qin Weibai, who had taken the cigarette, trotted over. Seeing Li Huaqing, she was slightly stunned, and then smiled and said hello. Make a pot of tea. Li Tianlan opened the cigarette, took out one, and said softly. Qin Weibai said, she smiled and said, pu or green tea. Green tea, a little stronger. Li Tianlan lit the cigarette. Li Huaqing was stunned for a moment, and then realized that the person sitting opposite him was Li Tianlan's real body. How long had it been? Had he returned from the purgatory of heaven capital? He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Qin Weibai said, and went out again. Li Huaqing looked at Qin Weibai's back and shook his head subconsciously. Lovely, gentle, and obedient. But he had never seen Qin Weibai like this. With a smile, Li Huaqing's voice was a little emotional. Sometimes, even I envy your luck. Li Tianlan took a drag on the cigarette and didn't respond to his teasing. He said straightforwardly, let's talk. Li Huaqing's pupils contracted slightly, and he was silent. Li Tianlan was not in a hurry. He smoked and waited quietly. I'm taking Li Guangtu away today. Li Huaqing was silent for nearly a minute before he slowly said. His voice was indifferent. But he was full of confidence. Chapter 1260. From Li Huaqing's light voice, Li Tianlan felt a kind of almost strong confidence. This was undoubtedly a showdown. But why was it today? What Qin Weibai predicted should have happened in Yuzhou did not happen. Things in Liaodong were still in a stalemate. The flourishing age fund was also as stable as Mount Tai. The situation in Zhongzhou state was generally calm, so why did Li Huaqing suddenly choose today to have a showdown with him? Was it because he valued Li Guangtu so much that he ran out of patience and was in a hurry to get him out to complete the layout before the election? Or was it because something happened inside the academics that could affect Li Huaqing's decision under the situation that no one could see and made Li Huaqing make up his mind? And this matter was obviously not suitable to be exposed now. Qin Weibai knew about this matter. But she did not choose to tell him. Was it because she did not know that this matter would be more beneficial to Emperor Dong's palace? Li Tianlan glanced in the direction of the living room. In his sight was Qin Weibai's slim and graceful back, light and elegant, and she looked very happy. This woman should be spanked again. Li Tianlan flicked the ash and looked at Li Huaqing. It seems that you really had a good talk. Li Huaqing laughed and said softly, he agreed to go with me. He agreed? Li Tianlan suddenly sneered. Did the president make a mistake? Or did he forget something? Li Guangtu is now my captive, a prisoner held here. He agreed to go with you? What value does his will have here? I've locked him up here for so long. Do you think I can let him go just because he agrees? He narrowed his eyes and stared at Li Huaqing. You want to take him away without asking for my opinion. Go and ask him first. Oh, Emperor Dong's palace is a small family, and the president really does not take me seriously. Li Huaqing lowered his eyelids, his expression was neither happy nor angry, and his voice was neither salty nor indifferent. Then I will tell you now, I will take him away. What was strong? What was overbearing? At this moment, in the face of the president, who many people thought had no temper, for the first time, Li Tianlan felt a great sense of oppression that almost hit him in the face. I do not agree. He tilted his head, looked at Li Huaqing, and sneered, my attitude is clear. I don't agree. I'd like to see if Li Huaqing can leave Emperor Dong's palace alive if I don't nod my head today. Li Huaqing's body tensed for a moment. The corners of his mouth curled up into a half-smile. Li Huaqing. Slip of the tongue. Li Tianlan said calmly, I want to talk about Li Guangtu. Ah, a slip of the tongue. Li Huaqing muttered faintly. This was indeed an explainable reason, but it could also be said that Li Tianlan thought so in his heart and said it directly out of straightforwardness. It could also be understood as Li Tianlan's threat. At most, they would just fall out. I believe you. Li Huaqing nodded. It's not important. Li Tianlan said, the important thing is that I have already said that I don't agree. Do you want to try to take him away by force? The tea is here. A voice with a hint of laughter rang out. Qin Weibai walked into the balcony with a delicate tray and placed 2 cups of tea in front of Li Tianlan and Li Huaqing respectively. The fragrance of tea and body floated gently. Li Huaqing was silent for a while, then laughed. Why? If I really wanted to take him away by force, he should be with me now. Li Tianlan turned the teacup expressionlessly, his eyes cold. Tianlan, you should know very well that Li Guangtu refused to join Emperor Dong's palace. In this situation, you offered such a generous offer, but he refused, which means that he can't join Emperor Dong's palace in the future. Li Huaqing said slowly, in this case, there is no point in keeping him here. It's much better than letting him out and giving Emperor Dong's palace one more opponent. Li Tianlan said lightly. Sounds like it. Li Huaqing nodded with a smile, but if you keep him locked up, how can you really annex the Purgatory of Heaven capital? A large part of the people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital are from the Li family. They may be on your side or on Li Guangtu's side, but to put it bluntly, they are in a dilemma. If you keep Li Guangtu, don't you worry that the Purgatory of Heaven capital and even the elders of the Li family in Emperor Dong's palace will have a knot in their hearts? Being locked up here, at least he can still be alive. Li Tianlan said calmly. Li Huaqing looked at him quietly and asked, you don't want to kill him? Li Tianlan nodded, but soon shook his head. To be honest, he didn't think about it. He didn't want to kill Li Guangtu before today. The best plan in his mind was the condition he proposed to Li Guangtu. This was also in line with the expectations of most people in the Li family. Emperor Dong's palace and the Purgatory of Heaven capital merged without large-scale conflicts. Both sides had their own gains, and they were harmonious. Divided lively family reunited, with Li Tianlan as the leader and Li Guangtu as the assistant, so that the Li family could return to its peak, and then create a dynasty similar to the Wang family of Beihai. This was the best ending. But Li Guangtu didn't accept it. How good was the condition he proposed? So good that there was only one condition left that could be better than the one he proposed. That was to let Li Guangtu become the palace master of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan would take a step back and become the deputy palace master, and hand over everything in his hands to Li Guangtu. Apart from this, there was no better condition than what he offered Li Guangtu. Not even a little bit better. But Li Guangtu didn't accept it. At that moment, Li Tianlan's mood was very complicated. He was disappointed, angry, self-deprecating, and finally became indifferent. From the second he left the room where Li Guangtu was imprisoned. In his mind, Li Guangtu was no longer a question of whether he wanted to kill him or not. Li Guangtu didn't accept the condition. It didn't matter whether he was proud, paranoid, or ungrateful. Because they were enemies. All enemies could be killed. He felt that he had done his best to Li Guangtu. So your reason now is not a reason. Li Huaqing said blandly, you don't care about Li Guangtu's life or death now. As long as he leaves, you won't show him any mercy. In this case, you have no scruples about not wanting to kill him. Li Guangtu might have been important to you before, but now that he has chosen to be your enemy, he is not so important anymore. Now he is just your enemy. Just? Li Tianlan laughed. Do you know that your words are tantamount to asking me to let the tiger go back to the mountain? If I nod today, the Li family and Emperor Dong's palace are likely to pay the price of countless people's lives in the future. If Emperor Dong's palace wants to develop, some sacrifices are inevitable. Li Huaqing's voice was cold. Then I can at least choose to reduce one enemy. Li Tianlan said coldly. You can't choose. Li Huaqing did not hesitate to face Li Tianlan's sharpness. He was extremely calm. I don't agree, and Jianghu state doesn't agree. Purgatory of Heaven capital, Li Guangtu must be your enemy. From another perspective, you can take this as a test from Jianghu state, or a test from me. Test? Li Tianlan seemed to have heard a joke and sneered. Why do you test me? Li Huaqing picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. He said slowly, because I am the president of Jianghu state now. Chapter 1261. Calm, plain, and condescending. Li Huaqing calmly looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. There was an unprecedented depth in his twinkling eyes. Just because I'm the president of Jianghu state. What does the position of president mean? All the major corporations advanced and retreated, playing for balance. Similarly, the Senate also had its own conflicts. Sitting in the position of the president, one had to face pressure from all sides. One had to understand compromise and balance, and there were all sorts of restrictions. But in any case, this position was the pinnacle of power in Jianghu state. At some point, if Li Huaqing really wanted to do something, then the so-called pressure and restrictions could be ignored. When he began to put the balance behind him and let the president's will fully show, inside and outside Jianghu state, Li Tianlan, Dongqing Wudi, and even Wang Tianzong were unable to really resist this will. Because this will represented the world's strongest country, the world's most advanced destructive weapons, the world's most terrible wealth, the millions of troops in Jianghu state, and the public opinion that could suppress everything. As long as Li Huaqing nodded, all the resources of Jianghu state would become his weapons and sharp swords. All the resources. Under such sharpness, Emperor Dong's palace, the Wang family of Beihai, and the so-called wealthy families were like flying snow under the scorching sun, melting quietly. No one could be strong enough to defeat the whole world. At least not now. Wang Tianzong, who was at the peak, and Li Tianlan, who was invincible, fought against this will. The best result was to ensure their own survival. No matter how many trump cards and how deep the foundation of the power they built was, it would be directly destroyed in the moment when this will press down. Li Tianlan asked Li Huaqing why to test him. Because of this. The atmosphere on the balcony suddenly became extremely depressing. The gentle and refreshing wind stopped without a sound. The world was gloomy. Li Huaqing put down the teacup, took a special silver steak, picked up a piece of cantaloupe from the fruit plate, and put it into his mouth. He said with a smile, Tianlan, can this identity test you? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and stared at Li Huaqing. His body was completely tense. Li Huaqing looked at him quietly, and could clearly see the endless lightning and thunder in his eyes. He suddenly smiled and turned to look at Qin Weibai, who had been silent. He smiled and said, Boss Qin, do you think I'm qualified to test Emperor Dong's palace and Tianlan? After serving tea, Qin Weibai had been sitting quietly beside Li Tianlan. She did not say a word, looking well-behaved and gentle. It seemed that she did not exist at all. But both Li Tianlan and Li Huaqing knew that when the topic reached an impasse, Qin Weibai was definitely the best buffer. Hearing Li Huaqing's question, Qin Weibai smiled and said softly, the president is naturally qualified. This should be our honor. Everyone in Huaqing knows that those who can pass the president's test are all outstanding. The current MP of Jianghu State, Minister Qing Shilai of the Ministry of Personnel, once said in private that he could have today's achievements because he passed several tests you gave him when he was young. Qin Weibai's voice was calm and unhurried. Her voice was very pleasant to the ears. No matter what the situation was, it was calm and elegant, clear and sweet. But when the content of her words fell into Li Huaqing's ears, the smile on his face suddenly froze. It was like a knife, quietly pressed against his heart when he straightened his chest and was about to fight with Li Tianlan to see who was better, and planned to use all his means to see who was better. Qing Shilai, a Jianghu state counselor of the Ministry of Personnel. This senior counselor, who was very low-key and never showed his talent, had an absolutely pivotal position in the academics. The whole academy had poured unimaginable efforts into Qing Shilai. Qing Shilai lived up to the academy's cultivation. He had reached his current position step by step and was recognized by almost all the groups. This was definitely not something that anyone could do. Especially Qing Shilai's current position. Qing Shilai controlled the Ministry of Personnel. In some ways, he controlled the personnel power of Jianghu state. Qing Shilai had absolute real power and the absolute heavyweight department. He could be recognized by all the groups in such a sensitive position. This alone was enough to show Qing Shilai's ability. Li Huaqing had always regarded Qing Shilai as his successor and had been grooming him. Qing Shilai had been his secretary, the mayor of Liaodong, the deputy governor, and the mayor of the provincial government. He had entered the top government office in Yuzhou, charged electricity in the Youth Academy of Jianghu State, and served as the deputy speaker and the minister of the Ministry of Personnel in Liaodong. Then, he was transferred to the Ministry of Personnel as a deputy. In the year when Li Huaqing reached the peak, Qing Shilai was the first deputy in the Ministry of Personnel. 5 years ago, he successfully entered the parliament and controlled the Ministry of Personnel. Li Huaqing's trust in him had never been shaken from beginning to end. Without the rise of the Li family, without the turmoil of the overall situation, Li Huaqing was unlikely to be re-elected in this election. Qing Shilai was the new giant that Li Huaqing and the academy planned to replace after he retired. Now that Li Huaqing could be re-elected, the academy was surprised and had more expectations for Qing Shilai. He was qualified to be a director this year. But Li Huaqing was still there. Qing Shilai might as well accumulate for a few years instead of fighting with others for a position that was neither rising nor falling. If Li Huaqing did not retire, he would have the final say in who controlled the Ministry of Personnel. In this way, Qing Shilai would not be moved. He would stay in the position of the Ministry of Personnel for another 5 years, which was enough for him to use the resources in his hands to really strengthen the academy and let his students spread all over Jianghu state. Li Huaqing could now use these 5 years to pave the way for him. Qing Shilai in 5 years was naturally not the same as he was now. At that time, he would have enough capital to strive for the top. 5 years later, Li Huaqing retired and Qing Shilai replaced him. His goal was at least the Prime Minister of Jianghu State, and even a strong contender for the president. With Li Tianlan's negotiation this time was largely because of Qing Shilai. Because of Qing Shilai's present. And also because of Qing Shilai's future. Just as he had told Qin Weibai. He hoped that Li Tianlan could mature, be absolutely invincible in force, and be immovable in mind. He needed a real, fully mature peerless heavenly son. Such a Li Tianlan was really worthy of him handing over Jianghu state to him. Li Huaqing bet that Li Tianlan could fully mature. More than 20 years later, Li Huaqing and the academics would fully support Li Tianlan to become the president of Jianghu state. This was a condition that Li Tianlan could not refuse. Once Li Tianlan agreed, the first thing to do was to ensure the influence and scale of the academics before he became the president. Only the support of the academics, which still maintained a strong influence after more than 20 years, was really valuable to him. Therefore, as long as Li Tianlan agreed to cooperate with Li Huaqing, the academics would immediately become Li Tianlan's firmest ally and supporter. Similarly, Li Tianlan would also become the firmest ally and supporter of the academics. The new group was now full of vitality. If it cooperated with the academics, at least in the next 20 years, the academics would not encounter any major crisis. During this period, it was enough for them to adjust the shortcomings of their own structure, make up for many defects, and increase their own foundation. Such cooperation was a real win-win situation. The academics won for a stable foundation for long-term development. The new group won for an infinitely bright future. With the support of Li Tianlan and the new group, the academics would naturally be more confident. Therefore, Li Huaqing already had the idea of pushing Qing Shilai to the position of president 5 years later. As for Qing Shilai's current situation, the reason why Li Huaqing chose to show his cards to Li Tianlan today was indeed because of Qing Shilai. To be exact, it was a phone call from Qing Shilai. The content of the phone call was somewhat inexplicable. Li Huaqing did not know what it meant at first, but now listening to Qin Weibai's soft voice, he understood everything in an instant. Are you scheming about Shilai's matter? Li Huaqing asked slowly. What matter? Qin Weibai blinked her eyes and said innocently, I don't quite understand. Li Huaqing subconsciously clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and did not speak. He was a little angry in his heart. But this anger was suppressed by him before it burst out. At this time, extra emotions were meaningless at all. He came to negotiate with Li Tianlan today because of Qing Shilai. Qing Shilai talked to him on the phone last night, and what they talked about was just some of his own private affairs. Qing Shilai's wife had died more than 10 years ago, leaving behind a daughter who was now the vice president of a multinational group in Jianghu region. In addition, Qing Shilai had a son who was 10 years old this year. Qing Shilai, who had not remarried for more than 10 years after losing his wife, had a 10-year-old son. It was clear what this meant. Li Huaqing knew the existence of that child and had seen him with his own eyes. During festivals, when he and Qing Shilai met in private, he even gave the child several red envelopes. Illegitimate child. It sounded dishonorable. But that was it. Li Huaqing really did not take it seriously. When one's status reached Qing Shilai's level, no, even if it was 2 or 3 levels lower than him, basically no one fell because of the problem of lovers and illegitimate children. This kind of problem was not a problem at all when one reached a certain level, but when there was a problem, it would inevitably be raised. When the position was higher, at Qing Shilai's level, almost all problems were no longer problems. The only problem for people at this level was whether the support from both above and below was enough. As for the rest, it could not be said that it did not matter, but there was really no need to worry too much. Li Huaqing had seen the child and the woman beside Qing Shilai. Although they had not seen each other many times, the woman had left a deep impression on him. It was almost difficult to find flaws in a woman in all aspects. Appearance, figure, temperament, speech, talent, life, character, she was flawless in all aspects. Just like Qin Weibai now. But a woman who was a little different from Qin Weibai. Her name was Gu Qingqiu. Her identity as a mistress could be said to be Qing Shilai's only weakness. A weakness that could not be called a weakness. No one would take it seriously. Even Li Huaqing had turned a blind eye to this. He didn't care about it at all. But he did not expect that one day this woman might really become a target for others to attack Qing Shilai. From the beginning to the end, the existence of this woman was a trap. A near-fatal trap aimed at Qing Shilai. A lover was really nothing. But if this lover had an extraordinary identity, this kind of trouble was enough to give anyone a headache. Gu Qingqiu. The second-generation pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion in Kunlun City. When this identity and this name were combined and passed to Li Huaqing's ears, Li Huaqing did not know how to react for a while. The most important thing was that Gu Qingqiu was going to turn herself in now. No one knew how this pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion turned against Gu Xingyun, but this was the result. Gu Qingqiu wanted to turn herself in. What was even more absurd was that Qing Shilai was completely controlled by this woman. Even now, he didn't blame her. Instead, he wanted to protect her. With this news came a lot of trouble surrounding Li Huaqing. Gu Qingqiu wanted to turn herself in, but she could not. Kill her? Qing Shilai could not do it. What he showed on the phone was that he wanted to protect that woman at all costs, even if she really turned herself in. But if she turned herself in, then her identity and relationship with Qing Shilai would appear in the sight of everyone in Jianghu State for the first time. What would be the consequences? Everything that Qing Shilai had done over the years would be studied with a magnifying glass, nitpicking bones from eggs. If they really wanted to find problems specifically, who dared to say that they had no problems at all? Qing Shilai, the successor of Li Huaqing, might become the target of all groups for the first time. Gu Qingqiu did not use Qing Shilai to do anything. Qing Shilai might be able to have a clear conscience, but it was difficult for him to be as immovable as a mountain. Under the focus of all groups, even if he could keep his position as a member of parliament, he would inevitably give up his position in the Ministry of Personnel. First of all, this would directly hurt the interests of the academics. The academics would also be violently turbulent. They might be dissatisfied with Gu Qingqiu. But all their emotions would be concentrated and vented on the Special Warfare Group and Gu Xingyun. But now Gu Xingyun was still the object of Li Huaqing's protection. Gu Qingqiu was obviously stimulated by something now. She did not think about anything else at all. The only thing she thought about was to stab Gu Xingyun with a knife. But after this knife, what should Li Huaqing do? In the face of the group's dissatisfaction with Gu Xingyun, should he suppress it? Could he suppress it? Once this matter was exposed, it would affect Qing Shilai's position and inevitably affect Qing Shilai's ranking in the parliament in the future. This kind of influence was fatal for the academics. The culprit was Gu Xingyun. When the matter broke out, did they not target the culprit, but protect him? Li Huaqing could completely imagine the huge chaos within the academics at that time. Internal troubles were brewing. If coupled with the targeting of all groups, Qing Shilai might fall directly at a certain point in time, not to mention going further in 5 years. Gu Qingqiu, Phoenix Pavilion, Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun. Qing Shilai, one by one, the identities were connected together. If this matter was used by someone with ulterior motives, if his means were clever enough, this might be a huge storm that could sweep the entire academics. And there were people with such means, such intelligence, such standpoint, such power. Of course there were. Now there was one in front of Li Huaqing. Of course, it was not Li Tianlan. It was Qin Weibai, who didn't look sharp at all and acted like a little woman at home. The reason why Li Huaqing was in a hurry to negotiate with Li Tianlan was that he wanted to immediately return to Yuzhou after solving the matter between Emperor Dong's palace and Li Guangtu. He wanted to talk with Gu Qingqiu and Gu Xingyun to stabilize this matter. He originally thought that this might be the work of the Prince Group, or perhaps someone else. But he never thought that the matter of Gu Qingqiu turned out to be the work of Qin Weibai. This meant that she not only had the intelligence and means to set off a storm, but also meant that she had already mastered the cause of this matter. This was well prepared. She was unprepared. Under such circumstances, even Li Huaqing was not sure that he could suppress Qin Weibai. Do you know Gu Qingqiu? Li Huaqing asked straightforwardly. He is a very interesting person. But he is also a very pitiful person. Qin Weibai's voice was soft. It's not easy to find him. Even Xian Yan doesn't know of his existence. You can think of it as a coincidence that I can find him. Gu Xingyun killed her whole family and trained her to be the pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion. Now she knows her life experience and knows some truth. Well, yes. Qin Weibai smiled and looked magnificent. I told her these things. I mentioned some things accidentally in a chat, so now she should only think about revenge and let Gu Xingyun die a horrible death. If this matter makes you embarrassed, then I'm sorry to cause you trouble. She was plain, without sincerity, and with a sense of ridicule. Li Huaqing smiled bitterly. For the first time, he experienced the sense of powerlessness that many people had experienced in front of this woman. Everyone knew that she was not simple, but no one knew from which angle this woman would make a move every time. He originally wanted to use a strong attitude to force Li Tianlan to take a step back, so as to fight for more benefits. But now Qin Weibai's simple words, a Gu Qingqiu, and a trump card directly put him in a completely passive position. Boss Qin is really brilliant. Li Huaqing whispered, I don't think I underestimated you, but in the end, I still underestimated you. I have a friendship with Gu Qingqiu. Qin Weibai said faintly, now she just wants revenge. She wants Gu Xingyun to lose everything, and she still has feelings for Minister Cheng. Li Huaqing was silent. He understood what Qin Weibai meant. Gu Qingqiu's goal was only to let Gu Xingyun pay the price. She wanted revenge. So now the only condition for her to give up surrendering was to let Gu Xingyun lose more things, and then use this as a bargaining chip, asking Qin Weibai to take this bargaining chip to persuade Gu Qingqiu. Since Qin Weibai had made a move, Then what Gu Xingyan lost this time would naturally be transferred to Li Tianlan. And in such a bargaining chip, what Gu Xingyan lost was the most important. At present, at least the idea of letting Li Tianlan serve as a special advisor of Zhongzhou state and letting Gu Xingyan continue to be the war god of Zhongzhou state should be unrealistic. Li Huaqing could save Gu Xingyan. But the position of the war god of defense, they had fallen. Chapter 1262. The atmosphere seemed to have changed unconsciously. Li Huaqing was negotiating with Li Tianlan. The two were at loggerheads, neither giving way to the other. But to put it bluntly, neither of them really wanted to turn against each other. The strong and radical attitude was nothing more than to fight for more benefits. If Li Huaqing wanted to take Li Guangtu away, he had to give an explanation to Emperor Dong's palace. That was to say, he had to give benefits. It was just a matter of how much. If he could suppress Li Tianlan, he could naturally pay a lot less. And Li Tianlan didn't care about Li Guangtu now. He captured Li Guangtu and gave him enough time to calm down. After calming down, Li Guangtu could see the situation clearly, see the gap between himself and Li Tianlan, and see a lot of things. At the same time, he gave Li Guangtu the best conditions. He had done all that he could give and do. What else could he do? Li Guangtu didn't accept his conditions, so he naturally didn't matter to Li Tianlan. It was ridiculous to say that there was any affection between Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan. They had no blood relationship. They were nominal father and son, and they never really admitted anything. They seemed to be in a state of opposition from the very beginning. Li Tianlan captured Li Guangtu, and Li Guangtu refused the olive branch of Emperor Dong's palace. Why couldn't Li Tianlan let it go? He wanted to rope in Emperor Dong's palace and let the Li family become one in a real sense. Li Guangtu refused. Without him, Li Tianlan could also make the Li family better. Now handing over Li Guangtu and letting Li Huaqing take him away was nothing more than one more enemy in the future. It was one more enemy for Li Tianlan. Not Emperor Dong's palace. Emperor Dong's palace, Purgatory of Heaven capital. Li Tianlan, Li Guangtu. Both sides regarded each other's industry as their own property. The only difference now was that a large part of the power of Purgatory of Heaven capital would really become Li Tianlan's property, while Li Guangtu hadn't gotten a cent of Emperor Dong's palace. Although the facts were in front of him. But he still had a dream. Li Guangtu wouldn't give up this plan. Now that he had left Emperor Dong's palace, he would naturally carry out this plan in the future. As long as he didn't give up this dream, he wouldn't kill Emperor Dong's palace. He would only kill Li Tianlan. His martial arts foundation had not actually recovered. He was using his mental strength to simulate the sword aura. His attainments in the field of mental strength were extraordinary, and he was infinitely close to the transcendent realm. But Li Tianlan was really not afraid of it. He didn't even have the slightest scruple. It was hard for Li Tianlan to tell his specific state now. Strictly speaking, in terms of realms, Lin Fengting, Li Guangtu, and even Jiang Shangyu were all higher than him. Li Tianlan was only in the invincible realm now. Well, the invincible realm that was infinitely close to the peak of the invincible realm. His true state was the same as the current moon gaze song. However, things like realms were completely meaningless to him. Before breaking through to the invincible realm, Li Tianlan already felt that there was something wrong with the so-called four realms of martial arts and the invincible realm. There was a certain logic to the existence of realms, but it was not comprehensive. If martial arts were to be interpreted in an all-round way, then it would definitely not be a realm. Martial arts could be summarized into realms. But it was difficult to fully explain martial arts with realms. Therefore, Li Tianlan didn't care about the so-called realms at all. A description that was difficult to justify itself in the current situation was no longer important to him. He was now trying to subdivide his martial arts into detailed things that could fully explain his own combat power. For example, strength, speed, explosive power, defense, willpower, body balance, and physical endurance. For example, sword energy, sword intent, and sword momentum. The so-called martial arts were the most basic and original things. Only these things were the real theory of martial arts. However, this theory was not mature in Li Tianlan's mind. He always felt that there was something missing in the theory he was currently constructing, which might be the key to his breakthrough again. But he still couldn't figure out what he was missing. It was proficiency, mastery, control, understanding, and application. These seemed to be right, but they were always not all right. There was no answer, which meant that he had no hope of breaking through. However, as he kept thinking and denying, his combat power was rising and soaring almost every minute and second. Li Tianlan actually knew very well what it meant for him to be invincible in the world now. It meant that in this era, his actual combat power was really invincible in the world. Li Guangtu, Gu Xingyun, and Jiang Shangyu were no match for him together. Even with Wang Xingxiao and Wang Xiaoyao, it was difficult for them to be his match. But it was only in this era. Now he was still no match for Wang Tianzong at his peak. Even if he had ruthlessness now. But even if he had ruthlessness with insufficient energy, he was no match for Wang Tianzong that night in Mormon's. Ruthlessness's charging speed had been several times faster now. But it would take at least 10 years to be fully charged. 10 years later, it would be ruthlessness's peak. At that time, with Li Tianlan's current realm, he would probably be able to replicate the eternal sword above Mormon's without suffering too much injury. But now, he couldn't. His real combat power seemed to be close to Wang Tianzong's at that time. However, that seemingly small gap was like a real moat. Li Tianlan could perceive that when he crossed the moat, the whole world should change dramatically in his eyes. And the key to crossing this moat was what he had been thinking about. It was the key that was missing in his martial arts theory. He didn't know what the key was, but he had been thinking about it. And his martial arts also made rapid progress in this kind of thinking, which could be said to be 1,000 miles in a day. No matter how impossible it seemed to be to cross the moat, it would be crossed by him with this kind of progress. So what if Li Guangtu was infinitely close to the transcendent realm? The so-called infinitely close was also incomparably far away from reaching it. Li Tianlan was completely confident that he could reach the end of martial arts one step ahead of Li Guangtu. That end might not be a breakthrough, but in the progress of his martial arts, he would have the combat power to rival Wang Tianzong and even suppress Wang Tianzong before the breakthrough. In that case, what would Li Guangtu be? This was Li Tianlan's current mentality. It was an extremely contradictory, inexplicable, but real state of mind, which made him think that this kind of reality was really real. He was confident that his combat power would enter a new level in continuous progress. But his realm would not break through. No, it was not the realm, it was the kind of thing that he had been thinking about, but it was difficult to express. This kind of thing should be a great increase in combat power, but it should not be a positive combat power, or something else. Li Tianlan couldn't express this feeling, but standing at his current height, he could feel a kind of vague suppression, even suppressing his thoughts. His combat power could break through, but his thoughts seemed to be imprisoned. During this time, Li Tianlan had always felt that he could communicate with Wang Tianzong after he recovered to see if he knew what it was that he had been unable to figure out. If he couldn't answer this question, it could only mean that in fact, he didn't really break through, but let his combat power enter that level little by little, just like himself now. In martial arts, Wang Tianzong was almost his only opponent. Wang Tianzong didn't come out. He didn't like anyone. Jiang Shangyu couldn't, Gu Xingyun couldn't, and Li Guangtu couldn't either. So now for him, since he could let go of Li Guangtu, it didn't matter to let Li Huaqing take him away. As long as he could give enough benefits. The tit-for-tat between Li Huaqing and Li Tianlan was also about this. Li Huaqing even did not hesitate to use his identity to suppress Li Tianlan. Doing so would undoubtedly be a little embarrassing. But his identity and position were at the top of the table. As long as he used it, he thought that Li Tianlan must bow his head. He asked Li Tianlan if he was qualified to test Li Tianlan because he was the president. What else could Li Tianlan say? If he dared to say it was not enough, then Emperor Dong's palace and the parliament would completely fall out, which was equivalent to his formal treason. Li Tianlan also knew this. So he couldn't say it was not enough. If he couldn't say it, he could only bow his head. Li Huaqing was originally waiting for Li Tianlan to bow his head. He even wanted to give Li Tianlan a way out and let Qin Weibai bow his head for him. So he threw this question to Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai didn't play cards according to the routine. No, this woman didn't play cards at all. In a few simple words, she directly hit Li Huaqing's vital point. Emperor Dong's palace? Li Guangtu. She didn't care about these. These seemed to be the reasons for the dispute between the two sides. But now, the real reason for their dispute was just because of interests. Li Guangtu said that she was a witch. A witch could see through people's hearts. She might not be able to do this, but she could see the whole situation from the perspective of an outsider. Every detail was in her eyes. This was not cleverness. Li Huaqing might not want to admit it, but he had to admit it. This was wisdom. So Qin Weibai bypassed the factors such as Li Guangtu of Emperor Dong's palace and stabbed the academic's vital point with a knife, throwing out Qing Shilai, the trump card. This was her layout, and it also played the best role when it was most needed. For Li Huaqing, for the academics. Qing Shilai couldn't give up. He couldn't make the slightest mistake in his future path. The academy had poured too many resources into him and placed too much hope on him. Qing Shilai didn't let anyone down. The only mistake he made was having a special lover. That was all. That was all. Gu Qingxiu never asked Qing Shilai to do anything. If the special warfare group continued to develop, maybe after Qing Shilai became a director, Gu Xingyun would really use Gu Qingxiu, the trump card. But now, Qing Shilai was completely innocent. Things came to this point just because of Gu Qingxiu's special identity. It was Qin Weibai who added a special layer of life experience to this special identity. So Gu Qingxiu lost control. She wanted to turn herself in, to retaliate against Gu Xingyun, and to make Gu Xingyun lose everything. She had this power now. The Phoenix Pavilion Master seduced the current leader of the academics. Once the matter was exposed, Kunlun City would undoubtedly be targeted and hated by the entire academics. Based on the current situation of Kunlun City, once the academics gave up protecting them, Li Tianlan could easily destroy the entire Kunlun City. The academics hated Gu Xingyun. But Li Huaqing had to protect Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun, Jiang Shangyu, Li Guangtu's trident could not be lost. It was an important chip to balance Li Tianlan. Without any one of them, the weight of this chip would plummet. He had to protect Gu Xingyun. But if the matter was exposed, if he protected Gu Xingyun, it meant that he, the big boss of the academics, would first have an extremely fierce conflict with countless people in his own group. What was this? If things really got out of hand, no matter what the result was, Qing Shilai was bound to be sacrificed. It was difficult to satisfy both sides. So he was in a hurry to negotiate with Li Tianlan. He planned to use Li Tianlan to face the next storm after the two sides reached an agreement. But Qin Weibai's words suggested another way. As long as Gu Qingxiu did not turn himself in, then everything would be easy to deal with. Gu Xingyun knew Gu Qingxiu's identity, but he now relied on the academics to protect him, so he certainly did not dare to say anything. If Gu Qingxiu did not say anything, then this matter would be a secret. This was Qin Weibai's arrangement. She could arrange it, and naturally, she would have the ability to close the net. She could make Gu Qingxiu give up turning himself in without being killed and completely provoking Qing Shilai. And Qin Weibai was now asking him for a bargaining chip that could persuade Gu Qingxiu. Such a bargaining chip, what could it be? Naturally, she wanted to suppress Gu Xingyun and get more benefits from him. This benefit naturally had to be given to Qin Weibai. Was there any difference between giving it to Qin Weibai and giving it to Li Tianlan? And to say the least, only by giving this benefit to Li Tianlan could Gu Qingxiu believe Qin Weibai's words to persuade him. Then she would give up turning herself in. And her hope of revenge would also change from self-destruction to relying on Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace to avenge her. Qing Shilai could not let go of Gu Qingqiu. In this way, with Gu Qingqiu as a bridge, Qing Shilai, the next leader of the academy, would establish a subtle relationship with Emperor Dong's palace. If the academy and the new group joined hands, this relationship would undoubtedly be more in line with Li Huaqing's interests. This was Qin Weibai's arrangement. Now she was sitting opposite Li Huaqing, enjoying the wind, quiet and gentle, but it was equivalent to directly telling Li Huaqing, "I have paved the way for you, and I have given you the steps. Why don't you give Zhongzhou State to me? What are you hesitating for?" Li Huaqing sat in silence. After controlling Zhongzhou State for so many years, it was the first time that he felt embarrassed. This was equivalent to being forced by Qin Weibai to cooperate with Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took out another cigarette and lit it. Naturally, he could also feel the change in Li Huaqing. Seeing that the president seemed to be forced into a corner by his wife, he took a drag of the cigarette. He reached out and grabbed a strand of Qin Weibai's long hair and played with it, with a satisfied smile in his eyes. Qin Weibai wrinkled her nose and rolled her eyes at him. Li Huaqing watched this scene quietly and suddenly felt extremely envious. No, it was jealousy. It was really difficult for him to evaluate this woman. An extraordinary woman who was rarely seen in Zhongzhou State for hundreds of years. A demoness who could bring disaster to the country and people. A goddess who could topple countries and cities. They were both, and they weren't. Her graceful bearing, her outstanding beauty, in the eyes of Li Huaqing, who was already over 70 years of age, could already be regarded as ordinary. However, she did not dare to underestimate her because of her intelligence and keen mind. If it were in ancient times, or if there was no Li Tianlan, it was hard to imagine what this woman would become. She was not a goddess who was high and mighty for ordinary people to worship and revere. She was the kind of goddess who could make most men bow their heads and crawl in awe just by standing here, Empress. But now, because of the appearance of Li Tianlan, she became a little woman who knew how to restrain all her sharpness. Empress? She didn't care. She chose to push her man onto the throne. She chose to use all her deep and secretive scheming methods in the dark, all for the man beside her. There was a saying. Men conquered the world, and women conquered the world by conquering men. But what was going on now? A woman conquered the world and then gave it to her man? Li Huaqing's eyes were a little complicated. Do you know what is most enviable about you? He looked at Li Tianlan and asked softly. Tell me. Li Tianlan played with Qin Weibai's hair. Seeing that she seemed to be a little disobedient, he pulled her hair gently, not willing to use too much force. Looking at the corners of Qin Weibai's mouth, Li Tianlan smiled more and more relaxed. It's not your talent in martial arts, not your invincibility, not because you are the heir of the Li family. Li Huaqing's voice was low. He pointed to Qin Weibai and whispered, the most enviable thing about you is that you have her. With such a woman by his side, as a man, it was really too damn worry-free. What was a good wife? That was it. She was strong and domineering in the outside world, but amorous inside. She knew strategy, knew how to taste, had a sense of propriety, and was elegant and generous. She could straighten out the harem, deal with family problems, and take care of the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Li Tianlan and the Dongqing clan were now harmonious, which also showed Qin Weibai's thoughts. She was the type of woman that every man dreamed of. Who didn't want her? Everyone wanted her. But only Li Tianlan had it. If I weren't old, maybe I would lose my mind because of jealousy of you. Li Huaqing sighed. Is there something in the president's words? Li Tianlan smiled carelessly. Li Huaqing did not admit or deny it. He just looked at Qin Weibai again and asked, Gu Xingyun, how about taking a step back? Qin Weibai's smile was subtle and elegant. She looked at Li Tianlan and did not speak. Envious. Jealous, Li Huaqing's mouth twitched and looked at Li Tianlan. Qin Weibai could make arrangements. But it was this boy who made the final decision. Li Huaqing took a deep breath and adjusted his emotions. Originally, Qing Shilai's matter would cause a lot of trouble. But if Qin Weibai took action, it could be solved. He originally wanted to negotiate with Li Tianlan. Now it was just two things combined into one. As long as the two sides could reach an agreement today, they could save a lot of trouble in the future. Gu Xingyun is not worthy of the position. Li Tianlan picked up the teacup and took a sip, frowning slightly. I'll see if the water is boiled. Qin Weibai said softly, got up and left the balcony. Li Tianlan continued, and his strength is a little weak. If you can do it, why don't you? Li Huaqing asked calmly. This was not a fit of pique. Since he decided to compromise and let Gu Xingyun take a step back, it was true that he thought Li Tianlan could do it. Then Li Tianlan would do it. Li Tianlan laughed. Do you trust me? As I said, I want to test you, but I don't intend to put you to death. Li Huaqing shook his head. It was me who proposed to let you be the special advisor of Jianghu state. In terms of power, you will be slightly higher than Gu Xingyun. In this way, you can also take the initiative in the next situation. Not enough. Li Tianlan shook his head. Li Huaqing had expected it and nodded. Gu Xingyun can go. The parliament appointed you as the special advisor of Jianghu state and the war god of Jianghu state. Is that enough? I want to enter the parliament. Li Tianlan put down the teacup, looked at Li Huaqing, and said softly. Enter the parliament. This was naturally different from the previous Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun's treatment was actually very high. He was at the same level as a director. It sounded a little higher than a member of parliament, and he could also attend the council meeting. But in many things, he only had the right to speak, but not the right to vote. To be exact, he was equivalent to a substitute director who did not enter the parliament and did not serve as a member of parliament. This identity sometimes played a big role, but sometimes it was extremely embarrassing, and its role was even far less than that of a member of parliament. What Li Tianlan needed was not the so-called same level as a director. Instead, it was better to take a step back. He served as the special advisor of Jianghu state and the war god of Jianghu state. At the same time, he would formally enter the parliament and become a member of Jianghu state. This identity controlled all the special warfare forces of Jianghu state. In terms of power, even in the parliament, he was a heavyweight who ranked at the top. This was also something that Gu Xingyun had planned for a long time. He was not qualified to take it, but today Li Tianlan was. I thought you were going to ask me to become a director. Li Huaqing laughed. Li Tianlan frowned. He did not understand the meaning of this sentence, so he simply asked, Are you mocking me? No, even if you want to be a director, I can help you with all my strength. Li Huaqing shook his head. I'm not sure. There are too many variables. Li Tianlan shook his head. And if I become a director, there will inevitably be one more director. It's so unstable. I just need to enter the parliament. Li Tianlan himself was too young. 23 years old. If he became a director of Jianghu state, it was not difficult to imagine how big the storm of public opinion would be in the whole Jianghu state. After all, a formal director was not like Gu Xingyun who hid in the dark before. It was to be officially announced by the parliament, exposed by the media, and roughly introduced his job. There were only a few directors. Now Li Tianlan went up, which could be said to be the real teeth of the storm. As for the members of parliament, plus the major directors, there were more than 20. Li Tianlan might still be a little too young among a group of old men, and he would also be exposed by the media and known by the whole country. But compared with becoming a director, Li Tianlan would undoubtedly receive less attention. The most important thing was that the resistance to entering the parliament would also be much smaller. It was enough for the new group to have Wu Jingmin enter the director's seat in this election. Li Tianlan entered the parliament, plus by Qin Qian. The substitute Zhou Yuanshan. and Ji Yankang of Jianghu, who was not very sure now. Such a lineup was enough. Is it stable to be a member of parliament instead of a director? Li Huaqing smiled. Li Tianlan also smiled. After all, stability was relative. In the case that the members of parliament in Jianghu state were generally in their 50s or 60s, a 23-year-old member of parliament suddenly intervened. No matter how low-key he was, it would be a real storm for the outside world. At that time, the people of the whole Jianghu state would know that he was the current guardian of Jianghu state and the first expert of Jianghu state. A series of structures that had been hidden in the dark, such as the special warfare system and the war god, would officially come out from the dark. This was enough to shock the whole Jianghu state. But Li Huaqing roughly understood Li Tianlan's meaning. It was indeed stable. Being a director and being a member of parliament were the same for the people of Jianghu state. They were both storms. But for the parliament, it was the opposite. There were only so many directors' positions, and everyone was fighting for them with all their might. Now there was no vacant position for Li Tianlan. There were relatively more seats for members of parliament, and Li Tianlan was fighting for the identity of a member of parliament. He already had a position that matched this identity. It was nothing more than giving Li Tianlan a position in the parliament, which was not difficult. As long as the parliament could accept him and be stable, Li Tianlan would not care about the outside world's public opinion. You want to be in this position because you want to be a shield for Yuanshan, right? Li Huaqing said with a smile. Yes, but mainly for the overall interest. Li Tianlan said lightly. Zhou Yuanshan would also enter the parliament in this election, but because of his age and qualifications, it was impossible for him to be a member directly. He should be a substitute member. He was less than 40 years old this year. If there was no Li Tianlan, it would be Zhou Yuanshan who was put in the spotlight and stared at by everyone. And he was the candidate for the president of the new group 15 years later. Putting him in the spotlight was not good for the overall situation of the new group. Li Tianlan entered the parliament. A 23-year-old official member was definitely more eye-catching than a less than 40-year-old substitute member. This was also a way to protect Zhou Yuanshan. But it was also a helpless move. Because the new group really didn't have many people who could go to the top. If there were many people like this, it would be best for Zhou Yuanshan not to enter the parliament this year. He had enough momentum. Pursuing power maximization in the short term would only make others uneasy. In this case, it's better to go further. Li Huaqing said slowly, it's not impossible to be a director directly. At least I have more than 70% confidence. This is not a bad thing for you, is it? Li Tianlan frowned and said nothing. Li Huaqing's meaning was a little strange. Of course, he could see the change in Li Huaqing's attitude. Originally, not to mention becoming a member or a director. He even didn't want to give Gu Xingyan the position of national war god. Now it was good that he finally relented, but he actually supported him to become a director of Jianghu state in one step. Just as Li Huaqing said. This was really not a bad thing. But it was also not a good thing. Advantages and disadvantages were mixed. In that position, in layman's terms, Li Tianlan was put on the fire to roast. A new group rising fast. He and Wu Jingmin became directors. At that time, not to mention the academics and the Prince group and the Southeast group, even the North group and the Giant group might have other ideas. The increase of power would naturally bring a lot of benefits, but at the same time, they would face a more complicated situation. What did Li Huaqing mean? Indeed, it's not a bad thing. Li Tianlan said slowly. Li Huaqing raised the corner of his mouth slightly. But I refuse. Li Tianlan said lightly. Li Huaqing narrowed his eyes and said nothing. Qin Weibai walked to the balcony again and added hot water to the teacups in front of them. I thought you wouldn't refuse. Li Huaqing said slowly. It's too troublesome. I'm not used to it. Li Tianlan said straightforwardly. Well. Li Huaqing shook his head. You can enter the parliament, but the positions such as special advisor and national war god are still too vague for the outside world. If you want to go to the front, the parliament will inevitably announce your position. Although it won't be too detailed, it can't be too general. The parliament can't completely transparent the structure of the secret service. So, Li Huaqing smiled. If you don't want to be a director, then you can take a position in the army headquarters. You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.